they were killing one of the biggest draws to me to retics, which is pattern, right? Reticulated patterns are unbelievable. And when you start stacking all these different genes on top of each other, especially when you get to albinos, basically you're just ending up with these yellowish, plain, no pattern snakes. And it's like, why are we doing this? Like, why are we taking one of the most fundamental aspects of this species and breeding it out? I don't want to do that. I want more pattern. I take issue with the terms dwarf and super dwarf in general, and I always have. Okay. It is nothing but a marketing term. Now, that is not to say that I do not believe that insular dwarfism exists in reticulated pythons. I do believe it exists. I had no idea what was going to happen with my life, especially once I got indicted and, you know, the cases were in motion. You know, I was fighting the state case. I was fighting a federal case. You know, and I had no idea what was going to go on. And the one thing that I had besides the gym is I had my snakes.
This episode is brought to you by Soul Reptile. Soul Reptile is a boutique, direct-to-consumer lighting and husbandry company focused on bringing the latest reptile physiology and lighting science into the hobby. They're the creators of the Vision LED, the most powerful UVA1 LED available for reptile lighting. They also produce precisely tuned near-infrared systems designed for specialized animals, including invertebrates. If you're serious about replicating natural sunlight and dialing in your animal's environment, Soul Reptile is pushing that science forward. Soul Reptile, the science of the sun. This episode is brought to you in part by ExoTerra. If you're as passionate about reptiles and amphibians as I am, you know that quality matters. I use ExoTerra products on all my reptile and amphibian enclosures, which is why I'm excited to be partnering with them. From naturalistic decor to innovative lighting and enclosures of all sizes, ExoTerra has everything you need for your cold-blooded companions. ExoTerra, make your reptiles feel at home. This is the Expert and the Idiot podcast. If you like the show and you'd like to support us, there's a link to our Patreon in the description below. Some benefits include getting access to new episodes up to a month in advance. There's also links to USARK and USARK Florida. If you're not already a member, please sign up. Enjoy the show. Well, what I'm going to do is I'll cut this section of our conversation out and put it after the credits. And if people want to hear it, it'll be there.
Cool. Sounds good, man.
So, all right. So I'm glad to finally get you on, man. And, you know, I just found out that you're a fellow Florida man, that you actually lived like 30 minutes, not even like 25, 30 minutes south of me, by the interstate. Yep. So, that's pretty cool. Obviously you can never come back here because of the legality.
Right. You know, well, that's a part. So, you know, and I have talked about this before, but it's not probably really well known. I got really into reptiles when I moved to South Florida when I was a teenager, and when I was in college there. And, you know, I was into reptiles my entire life. But when I was growing up in Northwest Ohio, number one, there's not a lot of reptiles up there, to be found out in nature. There are some, and what I could find, I certainly did go out and find and kept in shoe boxes in my closet when I was a little kid, and, you know, all that craziness. My old man despises snakes, like absolutely despises them. And so growing up, I was never allowed to have one. So of course, when I got to college and I was on my own, it was like, all right, I can do what I want now. And I got my first ball python, when I was a sophomore in college and had my own place. And it went pretty quickly from there. Part of that reason, and again, I don't know, you know, if you remember this, but the original Glades Herp was in Fort Myers, Florida. So Robbie, that was where his original shop was before he moved up to Tampa and got the show on Discovery and did all that. And so I spent a lot of time when I was in my in my early 20s around Glades Herp. And that was where I got a lot of exposure to all kinds of different reptiles. And also what led me down the path. So the progression for me went ball pythons, boas, berms, hots. and I just went straight into the kind of the most extreme stuff. I had a breeding pair of West African gaboon vipers. I had an 11-foot Eastern green mamba, copperheads. I had a couple of cobras. Never had any really Crotalus species. Trying to think what else I had back then.
Why a mamba? I mean, they just seem so fast and so intimidating.
You know what, man? This is kind of how I put it to everybody. I was much younger, faster, and dumber. That's really what it came down to. It was a snake. It got offered to me from a guy that I had bought some other hots from. He had it, and he was kind of having trouble selling it. And he's like, "Do you want this thing?" And it was like, "Fuck it." Like, sure, why not? And yeah, it was scary, dude. It was a snake that if you made one mistake with it, you were going to be in serious trouble. And again, this is back in the early 2000s, right? Like, venomous laws in Florida were pretty lax. Like, in order to get a venomous license, all you had to do was have, somebody who already had one sign off that, you'd done the hours, and boom, you had a license. So was I qualified to have it? No, absolutely not. But I did, and I was very fortunate that nothing bad ever happened to me, because I was pretty reckless with hots back then, and I got out of them. What kind of transitioned me sort of out of reptiles for a while is I got very into dogs. So I got my first pit bull, blue nose pit bull, when I was 19. And I quickly just became obsessed with the breed and with breeding and doing that whole thing. And I ended up kind of making a decision when I was around 22, just being like, okay, I can't do the reptiles and the dogs, and I really want to do the dogs. And so got completely out of reptiles and went full steam ahead with the dogs, and ran a fairly well-known dog kennel out of South Florida as well as South Alabama. And I was in Southern California for a little bit doing it for about 8 years. And then got just life happened, had to grow up a little bit. At one point I had 27 dogs on one yard. And like I said, life happened, had to grow up a little bit, ended up downsizing the dogs drastically, and then got into retics when I moved to Colorado in 2012. So late 2012, early 2013.
This episode is brought to you by Chewy. Most people think of Chewy for dog and cat food, but if you keep reptiles, you should absolutely be using them too. Chewy carries everything from all the brands you trust, like Exoterra, Arcadia, Zoomed, and everything in between. Live feeders to frozen rodents, enclosures, substrate, heat lamps, thermostats, water bowls, misters, and more, all in one place, shipped straight to your door. Sign up for Chewy Plus today, free for 30 days. You get free shipping, 5% rewards, and exclusive offers. I use Chewy, and you should too. Can you kind of expand on being reckless with hots? Because that could mean so many different things. I mean, did you not have anti-venom on hand? Were you free handling? Were you? Oh yeah. All right. Yeah. So let's talk about that. I mean,
probably the most notable thing I would again, I was a college kid. I had a house to myself, and I would throw parties at my house. And people would be there till 2, 3 in the morning, and I would want people to leave. And like I said, I had a breeding pair of gaboon vipers. The female was very defensive, extremely. I mean, would strike the glass anytime I walked by the cage. The male was actually pretty chill. There's a lot of examples now out there of people, handling gaboon vipers, and they can be one of the less reactive, hot species. And my male was an example of that. And so I could get him out, not reach in and grab him, but I could get him out with a hook. And I would literally at 2-3 o'clock in the morning, not sober, pull him out with a hook, grab him, and come down the stairs. Get the fuck out of my house.
Jeez.
So yeah, the fact that I never got bit is amazing. Like that's, just straight luck. So
that's so wild. We're very, very different people. I remember I had rules because I had a snake room, but I also had scorpions in there, and I did have a death stalker.
Okay.
And I had firearms, being a Florida man.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember telling my wife at the time, I think she was just my girlfriend, just being like, I've got a rule. If I have any more than 2 drinks, like none of that stuff comes out. Nothing gets touched. I don't even go in the snake room at that point,
And that's a very good rule to have. I was reckless at that age, and I did not have any such rules. I basically had cages all over my house, like, above again, this is way back in the days before flat screens, right? This is when we still had big rear projection TVs and big entertainment centers. And above the entertainment center, there was a cage. There was a cage on the table right when you walked in the house. And upstairs, like my office area, there were cages up there. I even had one of the gaboon cages in my bedroom at one point. Like, they were just everywhere.
Wow.
So yeah, I had no such safety protocols. And like I said, did I have any business owning some of those snakes? No, I did not. And the fact that I walked away from that period of life unscathed is amazing.
It's incredible, right? I mean, risk-taking behavior is always really intriguing to me, because I think that some of the greatest things ever achieved by humanity were because of risk takers and dangerous people that were not risk averse. And then at the same time, though, you need just enough aversion to risk to be able to survive, right? To be able to tell the story.
Correct. Well, and here's the biggest thing, right? It was a very different period in the world. There weren't cell phones with cameras, right? There wasn't Facebook. Like, none of this stuff existed. And so it wasn't like I was doing it for the attention. I was just doing it because that's just who I was at that point in my life. So
yeah. How do you feel about sort of the current hot culture? The culture around venomous. Obviously there's a lot of people I feel that are doing it right and doing justice by it, and then there are people that they're not hobby guys. They you can tell that they just want the likes. They need the affirmation. Yeah. Yes, exactly.
I think it's like anything else, right? You're always going to have people that are in it for the right reasons, and you're going to have people that aren't. And I think the fact that we have social media and you can take a video and post it, anytime you want, anywhere you want. I think that's a double-edged sword. There's a lot of reckless behavior that I see, especially around hots. And the unfortunate part about it, again, I think that exposure, right? And some of these guys that have large platforms that are exposing these animals to the world, right? I think that's great. However, what I don't think is great is when they're doing things in a reckless or careless manner, and they're glorifying it, right? And it's, some of these guys, you see near misses all the time. And it's like, one of these times it's not going to be a miss, right? You only get so many near misses before it becomes an incident. And when it does, then it's, oops, I messed up. Oh, I'm in the hospital. Oh, pray for me. And it's like, actually, I don't feel bad for you at all. Like, not one bit. And call me callous, call me cold. But if you're constantly taking that risk, at some point, I mean, it's Russian roulette, right? You're spinning the cylinder. At some point, the gun's going to go boom. And,
Yeah.
you know, it's the unfortunate part about that is that people see it, and especially younger people see it, and they're like, ooh, well, he does it. I can do that. Right. And it encourages them not just to get interested in the animals and to learn about them and to eventually one day be able to keep them. They want to do the glorification of it, right? They think that's the way to go about it and to get attention. And that shouldn't be the basis, I don't think, for anybody getting into anything, right? If you have a passion for something, great. Get into it because you have the passion. Don't get into it because you want the validation and, you know, essentially to be internet famous.
Yeah. So, and with you starting when you did, like you said before, that sort of social media validation phase we've been introduced to now, do you consider yourself like a true hobby guy that's in it for the animals and not for the likes?
Yeah. So here's the thing. I started Wildfire Retics as a social media channel because back in when I really got into retics. So first of all, I was keeping and collecting retics for years before I ever started anything under Wildfire, before I ever started breeding. I had one retic for about 4 years before I ever even got another one. And I started Wildfire because I was essentially, not essentially, I was on my personal Facebook page. There were times where I was working with the snakes and I would go live on Facebook, and I would do it for two reasons. One, my friends, just people that I knew, you know, to let them see what I was doing. And two, a lot of times I was working by myself and it was a safety protocol. Like this was when I was in Colorado. I lived out, you know, not in the middle of nowhere necessarily, but out in the country. And I was working with larger, you know, and not always the best tempered animals by myself. And it was like, well, if something happens, right, at least I'm live and somebody can make a phone call, right?
Yeah.
And so one video that I did with a snake, it was a pied retic, and she was super reactive. It ended up going viral, like not, you know, for any reason other than it was just a crazy snake and me handling it. And it ended up going viral. And I kind of thought about it and it was like, huh, okay. So people are interested in this. And at that point in time, there were very few people that were doing content around retics, right? Like you had Jay, even back then, Nerd wasn't really doing content, right? Like if you were in the industry, you knew who Nerd was, but they weren't really doing content. There were very few guys, especially that were focused on retic content. And one of the things that I had figured out or had learned was that information about keeping and especially breeding and the husbandry around retics, there was a lot of gatekeeping around it, right? Like the older guys in the hobby were, unless you spent money with them and then it spent hours on the phone, you know, messaging, whatever, yeah, you had boards like the Retic Nation and stuff like that, but there wasn't like open information sharing very freely. And so for me, it was like, okay, I'm definitely not an expert. However, I'm learning things as I go. And there are things that I've picked up on that I know aren't necessarily all that, you know, common knowledge. So I could start doing this and share some of this information. Right. And really it just started with Instagram, and posting pictures and short form videos, as well as Facebook. And it just grew organically. Right. And then there was a period where I was really heavy onto the YouTube stuff and doing videos on YouTube. And my YouTube really never took off. And again, I wasn't doing it for money. However, there was a lot of time and effort being put into it at a certain point. And I believe it never really took off because most of my content was long form. It was educational and none of it was like attention grabbing, right? Like
Mm.
I wasn't acting goofy or, or outlandish or anything. Like and some of it, especially in the early days, it wasn't even edited. Right. And to this day, a lot of my videos are not edited. Like I shoot them with a phone and send them. I do not have time to do video editing. And when I was making sort of an effort to do the YouTube stuff, I had a guy that was working for me for one of my other businesses, and he basically said, "Hey, like I would like to do this," and I was like, "Cool, have at it. Like, well, I'll shoot all the content you want. You want to edit it and put it up? Great, have at it." And so he did, and that's really why the YouTube channel for a while was so consistent, and there was content being put up, is because I had somebody that was willing to do that for me. But as far as Wildfire goes, obviously I've taken a big step back, not only with my keeping and the number of animals that I'm keeping, but my breedings as well. And it's really just a time thing. Like, when I'm here with the animals now, it is to clean, to feed, to interact with them, to get them out, let them have some exercise. And again, a lot of times I am here by myself, and it's not really always possible for me to take the time to set up even just my phone on a tripod, record what I'm doing. Like I'm trying to move through things and get things done. And so, circling back to your original question, about, sort of the purpose and everything of why I do it. Like it's never been about the likes for me. It's never been about the attention. It's about sharing what I know. And I've said this in a lot of different posts. I am far from an expert, right? I'm still learning about these animals all the time. Even as long as I've been keeping them, I just share what I know in the hopes that it will help somebody. And I know that it does, because I get a lot of messages to that effect, frequently. Like, "Hey man, I've watched all your videos on YouTube. Thank you for putting out the information that you do. I've learned so much from you." And it's like, cool, great. Like that's why I've done this.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it shows. And, it's how do you feel about gatekeeping in the hobby overall? And do you feel like we're trending in a positive direction where information is flowing more freely right now?
Well, so I'm not going to speak on other species, right? Because I don't keep anything else. Well, I have one black throat monitor, but I'm not like in any monitor groups or involved in that whatsoever. As far as retics, I do think it has improved, yes. And I think a lot of that is a newer wave of keepers, right? That have come in, that have learned, that are utilizing social media. And they're utilizing social media for a variety of reasons, right? Like some of it is to help advertise and help sell animals. And I get that. Some of it is to, garner a following. And so the short answer is I think it is improving. I still think it has a long way to go. And one of the biggest things that I believe, these snakes are not for even the majority of reptile keepers. They're just not, right? Like the commitment that it takes to properly care for an adult mainland retic, it's unlike almost anything else, really. And I've been a big proponent for years of larger caging, and even like these cages behind me. These are 10-foot cages, and I still get a ton of comments online about the cages are too small and all these different things. And I've gotten to a point where I'm like, look, I agree with you. Right? Like the animals, especially these larger ones, like they should have room size walk-in enclosures. At the same time, here's the kind of the crux of it now. Number one, we can't import these animals anymore, right? So what we've got here is what we've got. Number two, there are more of these animals in private collections than there are in like public zoos in the country, right? And in order for these animals to essentially sustain, there have to be breeders, right? Like we are what breeders are, what continue in captivity the species propagation. In order to breed retics, unless you are already a self-made multimillionaire and you can build, a 10,000 square foot building and then go build, 25 by 25 and, walk-in enclosure rooms all throughout it, the only way to properly do it, to adequately do it, is to keep them in cages, right? And I agree, larger caging is always better. And I'm working on that right now. I'm waiting on two very large cages from my buddy Mark at Jungle Cages. I got to go pick those up in a couple of weeks. But you know, I think there's been a progression even just within the breeding community. When I started when I started Wildfire, it was commonplace and perfectly accepted that a 6x3 was an adequate enclosure for an adult mainland retic. And,
Jeez.
and you saw it, right? Like guys had 17, 18 foot retics in 6x3s. And I've said from day one, that's wrong. Like it's wrong. Like that is literally stuffing the snake into a shoebox. Now, you can go down the rabbit hole of, well, look at the ball python breeders, right? Who keep hundreds of ball pythons in racks that are literally the sizes of shoeboxes. How's it any different? I don't necessarily think that it is, right? I think it's within the same vein. At the same time, I also have experiences with these retics that have shown me things, and I'll use one specific example. So I just put a video up 2 days ago. My girl Diamond's been with me for 9 years. She's 16 feet long. She's anywhere from 105 to like 115 pounds, but given range.
So nuts.
Back in my old facility in Colorado, which the facility itself was 5,400 square feet. Okay. And it wasn't built for reptiles. That was back in my cannabis days. I built it for cannabis propagation. And I kept my reptiles there as well. And there was a time where I came into the facility and I turned the lights on. And so the facility was divided in half, basically. Like there were rooms that were built out for cannabis propagation, and there was a huge open area. And the open area was about 3,000 square feet. And I walked in, and all the reptile cages were in the open area. And I walked in and turned the lights on, and it was very clear something had been in there, right? Stuff was knocked over. Like it was very clear. And it was like, oh shit, I got a snake loose. And I looked over, and initially I was like, no, all the cages are closed. Like, what the hell got in here? And so I'm looking around, I'm picking stuff up, and I'm like, no, hold on. And I walk back over to the cages, and it was an 8-foot cage, 8x3, so a little bit shorter than this. Right. And this is before I used the lock system I do now. I was just using those sliding kind of TDK locks that are, not worth a shit.
Yeah.
And on one side of one cage, there was about that big of a gap where the glass was open. It was Diamond's cage.
Mm.
The thing was, Diamond was back in her cage. The glass was open, but she was in there. So she got out, went on a tour of all 3,000 square feet and put herself back in her cage, right? And what that taught me was, okay, there is a comfort there for them, right? And if you study retics, especially large ones, do they get out and move and cruise around and hunt? Absolutely, they do. However, they also seek refuge in small, confined areas where they feel secure and that they can ambush from, right? They're an ambush predator. And in that particular situation, that's also where it was warm, right? The rest of the facility was not 80 plus degrees. It was probably in the high 60s, low 70s, but her cage was warm. And she literally went from one end all the way to the other, right? And again, knocked stuff over all along. I don't know how long she was out for. 2 hours, 4 hours, 8 hours, right? Like I hadn't been there since the day before. And she had crawled right back into her cage. And so again, when people are online, especially, are like, oh, it's animal torture, it's animal abuse. It's like, look, if you actually understand these animals and their nature and what they do, yes, if you give them the ability to get out and roam around, they will. However, they're going to come back to a spot where they feel secure, where they feel safe, that feels kind of like a cave. And that's where they're going to coil up and rest. Like that's where they're going to spend a good amount of their time. And further, to further that point, Not that there are a lot of big retics in zoos anymore, right? But if you ever go to a zoo that has a big retic, 9 times out of 10, that snake is curled up in a corner or underneath its heat source. It's not just out cruising around, hanging out all day long. Their nature is not to just move and expend their energy all the time, right? Like they will spend large amounts of time coiled up on their own in a spot where they feel secure. And so for me, with my animals, it's really about, do they get enough time outside of the cage, right, to climb around, move around, to get curious. And again, if you followed me for any length of time, you know that I'm usually trying to come up with inventive ways to give them more exercise. Like I had that kids sort of, climbing dome for a while that I inverted and hung from the ceiling to put them up on. I don't have that in here. But I've got a 12-foot ladder that I pull out, and I'll let them crawl up and down that and crawl around. I try not to let them get on the floor too much, because inevitably, where do they want to go? Underneath the cage stack, right? Yeah. They want to get underneath, behind the cages, because they feel secure there. And so, people that don't understand these animals have some pretty strong opinions about them. I've been keeping them long enough, at least, to understand that I could open all my cages in this facility and walk out of here and not come back for 2 days. Now, if I did that, obviously I'd have males that would fight and whatever. But I'm saying if I just did it with my females, right? All my big females, inevitably, if I did that with them and left for 2 days and came back in here, what I would find is all kinds of things knocked over and messed up. And I would guarantee, I'd put money that I would find some of them back in the cages. If I left the cages open, they would go back into the cages, because that's where it's warm, that's where it's humid, and that's where they feel safe.
Yeah. Why retics? What got you? Why, of all the snakes that are out there in the hobby, what has drawn you to retics?
So number one, that was a species that I never kept in my earlier days of keeping, right? So back in the early 2000s, once again, there were not a lot of people. You had Bob Clark, you had Jay, you had Nerd, right? That were breeding and selling retics. And they were expensive, especially, albinos and everything else. I mean, I remember looking at prehistoric pets stuff on king snake and fauna classifieds way back in the day. And I mean, an albino retic was minimum $3,500, right? I mean, if it was a really nice one, it was like $5,000. And I was in college, right? Like, I wasn't broke, certainly, but I didn't have $3,500 or $5,000 to go drop on a snake, right? And at that point in time, there were not really great options available for large scale caging, right? Commercially, most guys that had retics built their own caging. And could I have done it? I'm sure I could have. It just wasn't it just didn't have the appeal to me at that point in time. When I moved to Colorado and I had gotten out of reptiles previously, I just was like, you know what? I'd really like to have, a snake again. Like, I don't want a whole, house full of them, but I just want one. Funny, right? Funny how
that's how everybody gets back into it.
That's right. That's right. And so I started looking again, this is in early 2013, late 2012. I didn't realize at that point that there were Facebook groups for retics. And so I went back to what I knew, fauna classifieds, king snake, right? And started looking there. And I really wanted a white albino. That was what I really wanted, was a white albino retic. And it was really kind of almost impossible to find one. Like, there just weren't any. And I didn't just want any retic. Like, I had a very specific look that I was looking for. And for me personally, in Clark strain albinos, the snake needs to have a vibrantly, brilliantly yellow head, right? Like that to me is a prerequisite. And so I was looking and I came upon this purple albino, and it was a really, really gorgeous animal. It was advertised as a male, and want to say it was like 2 years old, and it was like $600. And I was like, sweet, done. That's a great looking snake. Yeah, buy it. So I did. And I got that snake and knew not a lot about retics. And so started looking for information. Actually, that was when I met Mark from Jungle Cages, because he is also from Colorado. I was looking on Craigslist for caging, and he had an ad on Craigslist for custom made caging, and I hit him up, and he ended up building me, my first retic cage. And again, at that point, I just wanted one. I had this big office in my house, and I just wanted one big cage. I measured the walls, like, this is the dimensions that I want, make it. And so Mark did, and I got the snake, and that snake ended up being a female. It wasn't a male. And it grew very, very rapidly, partly because I was just feeding it. And I just bonded with it. Like that snake was so chill. It was such a good animal. I could get it out whenever I wanted. I'd let it crawl around the house. And it was just such a cool animal to have. And so I had that animal for right about 4 years, and I lived in the foothills of Colorado, and I left for Thanksgiving. A buddy of mine was supposed to come over and look, essentially check on the house while I was gone. And I was gone for a week. And my buddy went over, I guess, like the day after I left, and everything was fine. And obviously it was Thanksgiving for him too. And he never went back to the house. Well, we had a big snowstorm come in, lost power at the house dropped down into the 40s. Snake got super, super sick. This is before I didn't have an exotics vet, right? Like I didn't have all these protocols and all these resources that I have now. I didn't really know what to do, couldn't find a vet to really treat it, and the snake ended up dying, right? And so it was a blow, right? Like I felt like I kind of failed. And so there was a part of me that's like, okay, well, you failed at that, so you probably shouldn't get another one. And then at the same time, I had the cage, I had the setup, and it was like, well, shit, man, like you kept it alive. Like it was an accident, right? Like, okay, only way you could have prevented it was have a backup generator, on your entire house, right? So I started looking for another snake, and same thing, and at this point, this is 2016, and I discovered all of the Facebook groups. And this is, again, in 2016, there were classifieds pages just for retics on Facebook. And as soon as I found those, I discovered all of these new morphs and all of these new genetics. And it was like, whoa. And I got the bug. And so I ended up getting another purple. And then this is kind of the story that launched Wildfire. So I got the purple. And of course, I'm still looking at all these different morphs, and I'm just getting starry-eyed over all these different snakes. And I saw this ad, and this guy had 16 retics that he listed for sale in Arkansas. He would not ship them. It said in capital letters, "Will not ship, you must pick up." And he was selling the entire collection for $500.
Whoa, what a red flag.
And I was like, this is a scam. Like there's no way this is real, right?
Yeah.
Guy didn't really have much of a profile on Facebook either. So I was like, okay, this is definitely a scam. But I hit him up and I was like, hey man, like I saw your ad. Send me some pictures, of the animals. And if this is real, like I'm interested. And he messaged me back pretty quick and was like, hey man, I assure you this is real. Here are some pictures. I'll get you some more. It's a package deal though. I won't piece them out. I won't sell one animal. Like you either buy them all or you buy none. And I was like, okay. So I looked at the pictures, and some of the stuff he was selling, I didn't even know what it was. Like I'm still so new in this retic journey. Like I didn't even know what I was looking at. But he had a couple of albinos. He had a sunfire, a couple different tigers, and the albinos were what I really wanted, right? And so in my mind, it was like, okay, well, for $500, I can go pick these snakes up, get them back here, figure out what I really like, And if there's stuff that I don't really want, well, then I can sell it. Right. And like, I'll get what I want and I don't have to necessarily keep all these.
Yeah.
So late 2016, I rented a Ford Expedition and I drove from Colorado to Arkansas.
Jeez.
And my girlfriend at the time went with me. And I remember we were pulling up to the house and I turned and I looked at her and I was like, listen, this is going to go one of two ways. Either we're going to walk in here and it's going to be the most disgusting, like just horrid situation that we've ever seen with these snakes covered in shit and piss. Like, you know, this guy's getting out and this could be really nasty. And if it is, we're still going to take all the animals because we like, you know, we're here and we're going to take them all. Or maybe for once somebody's actually like, you know, for real. And this is an okay situation. And I was like, either way, like just be prepared. So go up, you know, ring the guy's doorbell. Super nice guy. His name's Devin. Still in contact with him to a point to this day. And he's like, yeah, let me open the garage. And he opened the garage and I'm not exaggerating. It was pristine.
Wow.
These animals were clean. They were healthy. They were very well taken care of. And I just looked at him and I was like, why are you doing this? And he's like, dude, I'm working 80 hours a week out of town. I come home. Like, I know the animals are in good shape, but if I continue down this road, things are going to go down, you know, a worse path. And I'd rather just see them go to somebody who's going to take care of them. And I was like, okay. I was like, well, here's my other issue, man. Like, I don't have caging for all these. And he's like, you can take whatever you can fit in your truck. And I was like, done. And so like a lot of these were old school, like boa file wooden and, you know, melamine cages. But I took everything I could fit. I mean, I played Jenga for 3 hours getting cages and totes and everything with snakes in them. And I took all 16 snakes and as many cages as I could. And I drove straight back to Colorado. And that was kind of what started Wildfire, were those 16 snakes. I do still have one of them here. Looking at it right there, my big platinum girl, Alice, that's where she came from. You know, and again, kind of one of those stories where like, you never know. Alice is 19 feet long and, you know, she's 150-ish pounds. Like, you know,
jeez, man,
she's a huge retic. And she's been with me for 10 years. You know, and one of the best tempered animals I have in my collection. You know, and again, genetically, nothing super spectacular, you know, in terms of breeding or whatever, but she's just an awesome snake and she's one that I'll never get rid of. So yeah, I mean, why retics? I guess the question now is more like why retics and why nothing else? Nothing else besides hots interests me as much as retics. And for me, I need to be interested in it. If I'm going to keep it, if I'm going to care for it, if I'm going to have it, I need to have a real interest and a passion for it. And the only other thing that I really would like to keep are hots. And that's, again, I am much older, wiser, and not as fast as I used to be. So that's kind of out of it. And especially now with my son, that's just out of the question for me at this point.
So with where you are now with all these mainland localities and sort of the direction that I guess you could say the retic aspect of the hobby has gone is more towards smaller, better, super dwarf, you know, all these you know, quote unquote smaller localities.
Yep.
So what kept you from going in that direction and instead going in the complete opposite direction and running directly towards the giants?
So number one of the things about retics that appeals to me is their size. Okay. I like big animals. I keep big dogs. I like big snakes. Small doesn't appeal to me. It just doesn't. And never has. And I'll never forget when I started Wildfire and I first started attending shows in Colorado, there were some guys that, you know, were in the retic community there. And they all came up to me and they're like, dude, where's your super dwarf stuff? And I was like, I'm not doing super dwarfs. I have no interest in it. They're like, oh, dude, you'll never make it. You'll never make it. Like, super dwarfs are the way. It's the only market, that has any potential. No one wants big snakes. And I was like, well, that's cool. I do. Like, that's what I like. I'm not going to keep and breed stuff that I don't personally like. That's just not who I am. And lo and behold, I wasn't the only one who liked big snakes, who liked big retics. And that is part of how I made a name for myself, is like, look, I'm not going in the direction that everyone says that you need to go and, doing small snakes. That's not what I want to do. I want to make big snakes. And, still to this day, that's what I want to make I want to make these retics as big as I can. That's what appeals to me. Right. And that's fine that it's not, this mass appealing market. That's okay. I'm all right with that. However, at this point, people in the retic community know, hey, you want, not necessarily guaranteed, but if you want a really good shot at having a big snake, Weston's one of the guys that you go see. Right. And, again, a big part of it for me is it's just what I like. Like, I'm not going to keep stuff and try to sell things that I'm not genuinely interested in, which is also why I don't keep other species, right? Like, if it doesn't grab my attention, why do it?
Yeah, I that resonates with me. I mean, I have Argentine boas, and I being in Florida, I can't get, I would love to have a Burmese python.
Yep.
I'd really love to have one. I'd love to have a mainland retic. And if I was in a state that allowed that, I would probably have, one of each of those, but the only thing I could get is, probably the largest and honestly, just a really impressive animal too, is the Argentine boa, and their natural history is very cool. And, it is very appealing, the same way that, mainland retics are very interesting animals. I mean, from a natural history perspective, they're incredible. I mean, they're apex predators. There's no way around that.
Exactly. Yeah. And that is part of the appeal to me, right? Is that it is an apex predator. And if I was in a state that allowed it and I had the property, I would have a big cat. Like, I would have a male African lion, straight up. Now, would I have it where I was, well, yeah, I would. I wouldn't want to have it just in a cage to look at it, right? Like, I would get it as a cub and raise it, and I'd be in there, hanging out with it, wrestling around with it like that. I would love to do that. I've never lived in a state that would allow that. And I'm not going to move to a state just for that, right? Like, that's just not, especially at this point in my life, it's just not feasible. So a big part of the appeal with the retics is they're an apex predator, right? And especially, so back in 2019, when I was in Colorado, I got a call, and I'd heard the guy's name. He wasn't a breeder, but I had heard of him, and I had heard that he had some giant retics, right, in Colorado. And he called me, and he was like, hey, you don't know me, but this is who I am. And I'm calling because I have a really, really large retic that I have to rehome in the next 30 days, or animal control is going to come seize it and euthanize it. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, well, like, can I come see it? And he's like, yeah. And so we set it up. His name's Sean, and, super, super great guy. I still to this day talk to him, but he had, and to this day, I had never seen somebody with a collection of such not just unique, but freakishly large reptiles. Okay. And so he had a couple of retics. He had an anaconda, and he also had the largest Asian water monitor I have ever seen in my life. I genuinely thought it was a Komodo dragon, and I'm not exaggerating. Like, when I saw it, I was like, yo, what are you doing? You can't have that. And he's like, what do you mean? was like, that's a freaking Komodo dragon, dude. And he's like, and he laughed. He goes, that's an Asian. I was like, there's no way that's an Asian water monitor. I'm not, this thing was at least 9 feet long. Like
Jeez.
it was friggin' huge. Anyways, he had this snake. Her name was Nefertiti. And I ended up getting Neffy. And there's a number of posts. Unfortunately, I didn't have Neffy for very long because of she had a tumor. She had it when I got her. Had it operated on, and she ended up passing away from complications from the surgery. But Neffy was legitimately 21 and a half feet long, and she was 222 pounds. And that's not my weight. That was Colorado State University. They measured her. They weighed her. That snake changed my perception, even just of mainland retics and what their potential was forever. And I hope, and I have some pretty solid hope that I have a snake or two in my collection that has the potential of reaching that size. But I don't know for sure I'll ever have an animal like that again. Working with her, especially getting her as an adult and having to build trust with that animal was an experience unlike any I've ever had. That snake, and again, this was an animal I worked with by myself on a frequent basis. And there were times where she gave me serious pause where I was like, yo, if she makes the wrong move right now, I'm in a lot of trouble. Like that snake could have killed me 2 seconds. And frankly, at her size, I think I'm a large enough human that she couldn't have actually eaten me. I absolutely do not rule out that she would have tried though. Like, especially if she was hungry enough. And that experience really, it just changed the way I looked at these animals and the ultimate respect that I have for them and what they're capable of. When, again, as you said, apex predator, like these are an animal that very easily not only can take your life, but in some cases, depending on who you are, and your physical size, could legitimately consume you as food. Like, and that's for me, it's not an adrenaline rush, but like there's a draw in that. Like there's an inherent danger. And that still, it does appeal to me. I'd be lying if I said it doesn't.
You had mentioned wanting a lion. How does that whole culture make you feel about the vast majority of people that do keep big cats and sort of their persona and the way that they treat the animals as well, and the fact that once they are full grown adults, they're extraordinarily dangerous.
Right.
So like, how do you, I'm kind of curious, like if you were to get one, how do you do that ethically? And how do you set yourself apart from all the lunatics, the Tiger Kings, if you will, that they just make it gross. They make it disgusting.
So number one, you don't keep multiples, especially upwards of 10, 20, 30 of them. Right.
Yeah.
Like don't do that. So I'll take that back. There's a great example of how to do it in Colorado. There's a place called the Wild Animal Sanctuary. The main facility is in Keensburg, Colorado. And then they have a new property down in Southern Colorado. Don't quote me on this, but I want to say their property in Southern Colorado is over 2,000 acres.
Jeez. And
they have literally built like 2 and 3 acre enclosures, right? They're not really enclosures at that point, right? But they're properties where they'll have 1 or 2 cats, right? And yes, they're fenced in, and they're secured, but that's how you do it, right? You don't have a 10 by 10 cage with a 500-pound lion just pacing back and forth, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even some zoos you go to, honestly, like
I was just going to say that they
don't have adequate setups for these animals.
Yeah.
And so for me, if I was going to do it, number one, I would have to be on a very sizable property. And by sizable, I mean 50 to 100 acres, like, large.
Yeah.
And I would build an enclosure, right, that was several acres for the animal. And, it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to do it properly, right? Between the fencing and everything else, the animal wouldn't be in a cage. It would have area to roam. And again, you would have to build things in like ponds and, ways to feed it and, things of that nature. And again, of course the dream would be able to interact with it, right? To go in at the same time, being cognizant of, if you give a wild animal that kind of space and that kind of territory, things may change, right? And a point may come where you have to look at it and go, this has now crossed the line, from manageable to it's just genuinely unsafe and I can no longer do this, right? And you have to be able to have that, that sense and that, that sort of self-check, that ego check, right? And like for me, I know that day's coming with these snakes, right? Like there's a point, probably in age more than anything, where, and I say that, and then you look at guys like Bob Clark, Bob's 70 and he's still keeping big retics. So is it possible? Sure, it's possible. However, I know there's a point at which my ability to work with these really large snakes, it's going to be like, okay, maybe I'm past the point where this is, manageable anymore. And so I really think that's what it comes down to. And, there are ways to do anything, and then there's the right way to do something. And that's where, even for me, I'm constantly looking at the snakes that I have and what I can do that's in their best interest. And, I've talked about this previously, and this is happening. So my largest Sula, Valkyrie, the one that just went through surgery, went not egg bound, but had a tear in her salpinx, due to, due to laying the eggs. And again, the eggs that she laid are massive. There were several in the clutch that were over 350 grams, which anybody that understands breeding and egg size, they hear that and they're just like, wait, what? Yeah. So she's recovering really, really well. She's doing great. And in probably the next, I would say 6 weeks, she is going to live at the Loveland Living Planet Aquarium up in Draper, Utah. And the reason for that is they built in their new Asia. They built a whole new building, and they've got an Asia exhibit, specialized to animals of Asia. That's where their Komodo dragon is. She has a room size enclosure waiting for her. It's wow. I don't remember the exact dimensions, but it's at least 25 by 25.
Holy shit, man.
Yeah.
That's a big room.
It is. It is a legitimate walk-in enclosure with, it's amazing, right? It is one of the best built enclosures I've ever seen. And I'm donating her to the aquarium, and I'm doing it because she will live out her absolute best life there, versus what I can provide for her here. And so, again, I think that's our ultimate responsibility as keepers of these animals, is to be constantly evaluating what we're doing, what our capabilities are, and what is in the best interest of the animals, and putting that ahead of this is what I want.
How big is she now?
So she's 19 foot 7 inches. And when she was weighed at the vet, and this is after, so she ate her last meal last August, and she was weighed in April, and she was right about 150 pounds. And so, normally the last time I had weighed her, she was a little over 170. So, she's a big snake. She's a big animal.
Golly, man. Jeez, that's nuts. What are you most drawn to now? Are you drawn to localities, or or morphs? What do you keep now? Is it almost all localities? And how important is it that we keep those animals pure and not hybridize them?
So the majority of my collection now are locality animals, either pures or crosses. So I, I, because of my background in breeding animals in general, not just reptiles, but dogs, I understand principles of breeding. I'm going to say it at a deeper level than most. And one of the things that became very obvious to me very early in my breeding career was the level of inbreeding, not just line breeding. And there's a distinct difference between those two things, but the level of inbreeding that was occurring within the reticulated python community. Okay. Number one, morphs are a genetic mutation. They're an abnormality, right? And when you start stacking those mutations or abnormalities on top of one another, right, that are, yes, they occur naturally in nature, right? It's within the snake's DNA, but it's still a mutation. When you start stacking multiples of those or multiple generations of mutations on top of each other, things start going wrong very quickly, right?
Mm.
And within my first couple of years of breeding, I'm having snakes come out of the egg, no eyes, half a jaw, one eye, kinked, just all these, and a lot of breeders don't want to talk about this, right? They don't want to admit to this, but anybody that's breeding morphs, mutations, has seen it at some point, right? Two heads, like just all sorts of weird stuff. And for me, as a breeder, it's like, why am I continuing this? Why am I continuing to create animals that aren't healthy, right? Not even the pinnacle of their genetics. They're not even healthy. These aren't even viable animals. And so what I started looking at was, okay, how can I start making these animals healthier, right? And the number one way to do that is fresh blood, right? And the only way you bring in fresh blood into your program really is wild caught, right? You need a completely unrelated animal from the wild that it's an entirely fresh dose of blood into that mutation or whatever it is. And so when I made the decision to start doing that, there were very few guys that were even breeding or producing locality animals, right? Like Rodney Bolick was one of them. The guys that ran Locality Core, Wolfgang and Nick, they were doing it. There were a few scattered guys. And so I picked up a couple animals from Rodney with the intention of using them to basically refresh my gene pool, right? Knowing that that's like a 8 to 10 year project, right? If you take a wild caught or an F1 animal with no hets, right? Just essentially a normal, and you breed it into, let's say, an albino, right? Well, you've got to do a couple different breedings unless, again, and this is what a lot of people do, they would just take offspring from that one breeding and breed them back together. Okay, I'm good. I refreshed my gene pool. No, you didn't. You inbred, right? You took the same blood and just bred it back to each other. To truly refresh a gene pool, you've got to do multiple breedings. And yes, it could be with the same wild caught animal because it's wild caught blood, right? And so you're refreshing. And so then down the line, you're line breeding, which is a completely different style of breeding than inbreeding. And line breeding does work. And it's been proven, in dogs for a century, right? You have one dog that is everything that you want. You breed him to multiple different females, and then you take different offspring from those pairing and start breeding them back together so that, yes, there's a commonality in the genetics, but you have enough other genetics to keep things from being inbred, basically. And so that's kind of where my brain was going. And then in 2023, I had the opportunity to acquire a fairly large collection of locality animals, right? And so I took that opportunity. And when I got those animals, a number of them were wild caught and some of them were F1s. And kind of just, it renewed not just my interest, but like the passion, because it was no longer just this, granted, big retics that are calm are great, right? Like they're super cool. And I love being able to take them to educational shows and stuff like that and let people interact with them. But there's something very different about a large wild caught or F1 retic that has an attitude, right? That isn't exactly keen on interacting with you. And number one, trying to build a level of trust with that animal to where you can work with it. But also number two, just always being on your toes with it, right? And never really knowing how things are going to go. And so that really kind of got me more down a path of like, okay, this is what I'm interested in, right? And if I'm honest, where the retic community was going with breeding, with mutations in genetics, they were killing one of the biggest draws to me to retics, which is pattern, right? Reticulated patterns are unbelievable. And when you start stacking all these different genes on top of each other, especially when you get to albinos, basically you're just ending up with these yellowish, plain, no pattern snakes. And it's like, why are we doing this? Like, why are we taking one of the most fundamental aspects of this species and breeding it out? I don't want to do that. I want more pattern, right? I want to have retics that you're looking at their pattern and you're looking at all the different, combinations within that one animal. And you're just like, oh my God, like, look at that. Whoa, look at that. Look at the way the diamonds meet there. Look at the way the dorsal. And so that's where it really started taking me back into locality animals and what not only their potential was with refreshing the gene pool, but also just keeping the localities, as you mentioned, pure, right? And making more pure localities. And what has happened now is people have realized that localities are really almost especially mainland localities are pretty much the rarest of retics in the country now.
Yeah.
There are very, very few of them. And I've been fortunate enough to acquire a number of them and have them here. And then, another guy here in Utah that I've become really good friends with, Mason from Mayray Exotics, he's gotten very, very deep into localities, and he's acquired a number of animals too. And I would say at this point, between the two of us, in terms of mainland localities, we probably have more than just about anybody else in the country, at least in the public eye. I'm sure there's somebody, you never know what somebody's got in their basement, right?
Sure.
That isn't, in the public eye.
Yeah, it's that I really think that well, for me personally, morphs are like a bottomless pit. It's a rabbit hole you can go down and never get back out of. You can't dig yourself out of it because it's endless. There's endless variations and combinations, and somebody's always going to have something new and a world's first and $10,000 snake and all this other stuff. And a lot of these things, as soon as you get them, they start losing value so quickly that then, you might put your ethics to the side to be able to breed this thing as quickly as possible. Right.
There it is.
But then there's a nobility. There's sort of this noble effort behind keeping pure localities because you're preserving something in the hobby.
Yes.
That could very easily disappear and never be seen again.
I'll be honest. If I don't look at me necessarily as a preserver of it. I acquired the animals that I have because I wanted them, like mainly for myself more than anything. But somebody like Mason and frankly, Mason being here in Utah and becoming friends with him, it reignited something in me as well, because he got into this. He went initially down the route of, the super dwarf and the smaller stuff, and, was kind of going that route. And then he and I met, and he came down and he got to spend some time with some of my animals. And I'll never forget, it was a couple of weeks after that, he texted me. He was like, dude, he's like, seeing your snakes changed everything. I don't want these small localities. I want what you have. And I was like, dude, just rock on. Like, understand the commitment you're making, right? Like, this is a whole different level of commitment, but hell yeah, dude, like, love it. And he has spent significant time and money acquiring the animals that he's acquired. And it's in the name of preserving them, right? Because he understood and mainly just from his research and trying to source certain animals, how rare they are, right? And that is really at this point, like some of the breedings he's doing, some of the breedings I'm doing, that is our purpose in it, right? If we don't do this, another 5 years, some of these localities are gone. Like they're and not that they're like extinct per se, but the only people that would have them would be like private collectors that don't breed, that aren't in the public eye, that want nothing to do with the community. And when that happens, the animals might as well be extinct, right? Because if you don't know that they exist, if they're not being bred, if they're not being at least somewhat offered out into the public, at some point they will completely die out, right? And again, we cannot bring any more of these into the country right now. Yeah. Certainly, I'm sure there are some people that can figure that out, and more power to them if they want to go that route. But there are very, very few of the certain localities left in the country. And yeah, I mean, and it's sad, right? Because at the end of the day, yeah, morphs are cool. And there are some that are just jaw-dropping, like, oh my God, I can't believe that actually exists, right? I can't believe that's a natural creation. At the same time, I don't feel like that's what got most of us into retics, right? What got us into retics was looking at the wild types and the spectacle of them and the size and just kind of the awe. And it was like, oh my God, that is amazing. Like that snake is incredible. And now my appreciation for, the pure localities far surpasses the morphs. Sure, there are always going to be some beautiful morphs. Like I said earlier, to me, it is very, very hard to beat a classic Clark strain albino, so long as it's a stellar example of its genetics. Now, that right there is the catch-22. A lot of people make albinos, purples, whites, whatever, lavenders, and they just don't look very good because people just slap animals together just to make more of them, right? And that's where, we can go down the whole rabbit hole of selective breeding and all that. But with the localities, the more localities I hatch out and watch them grow, the more fascination I have with them. Like the more interested I am with them and the more pulled in that direction I am.
Well, isn't it cool seeing variance amongst localities? I mean, isn't that such a cool thing? I mean, so for me, like I have blood pythons and they're sort of, a big snake in a smaller package, but they're still a big, python that could really do a number on you. Mm-hmm. And
they call them blood pythons for a reason.
Yeah. And you can see the variation. I have so many friends that have blood pythons and they'll hatch out a certain line or a locality and you see just the variation there where it's like, this one's got, it almost looks like, it's got like a natural striping going on and this one's more spots and dots going down the lateral. And, so you get to still experience a wide variety, and different types of beauty, but in something that's just a little bit more simplistic from the standpoint that you're not stacking all these potentially deleterious genes, like you said before.
Correct. And that's also where, and something that I do have a ton of interest in, you mentioned keeping the localities pure. While I am all for that, and I think that we need to, I also think one of the future or part of the future of retics are locality crosses. Because at a certain point, right, there are only so many pure locality animals that we have. I'm just going to use Sulas as an example, right? There are not very many lines of pure Sula in this country. And at a certain point, and it's coming very quickly, there won't be any new combinations of Sula bloodlines to cross, right? they will all have been intermixed. And so at that point, when that happens, now you're getting to a degree of inbreeding, right? And at a certain point, all of the Sulas in this country will be inbred. They just will.
Sure.
There's no way around that. The only thing that can be done is to incorporate other localities and essentially make mutts, right? We call them locality mutts. I just did it this year. I made these 75% Sula babies that are 25% Malaysian. And I made those by using a pure Sula male to my 50% Sula, 50% Malaysian female. Part of the reason I did that is because that female, the bloodline of Sula that she has in her is unrelated to any other bloodline of Sula in the country. So the father, her father is a very specific animal that we really don't know how much he was bred, because the guy that owned him was very secretive and spread a lot of misinformation about it. But what we do know is, and I actually have two animals from that clutch, is he crossed that male, and that male was huge. He was from the Palopo region of Sulawesi. He was 19 feet long. His head's almost as big as a dinner plate. Like, he's a massive snake.
God.
And he was wild caught, and he was bred to a wild caught Malaysian female who was also huge. And so, number one, the fact that it's two wild caught snakes, right? The complete and from completely unrelated regions, the blood that's in those animals is unrelated to anything else. And so I have two of them. Actually, one of them's right there behind me. That's the male. And those two animals, to me, in my collection and for breeding, have extreme value because of what they have in them. And so part of the reason I did the breeding to make the 75% is because I now have a 75% Sula animal that has an unrelated bloodline in it that I can now take and breed to other pure Sulas that I have. And will they ever be 100% pure? No. At the same time, if we look at, the super dwarf market, right? That market has been based on 60 something percent, 75%, 87.5% animals for a long time, right? The mainland locality market will go the same direction. It has no option, right? And again, because there are so few mainland locality animals left in this country, like I said, at a certain point, all those bloodlines are going to be crossed. Our only option is to start outcrossing to other localities to make healthy animals. And so that, to me, is a big future lane of mainland retics in general. And as people are also starting to cross mainlands into morphs, which I think is a great thing, right? So long as it's done the right way. And, someone who has really shown what is possible with that is Jacob over in Europe. I mean, some of the animals that he's producing, and they're morph animals, but then they've got 25% Sula, 25% Borneo. Like, he's got these locality percentages in them, and you're looking at these animals that he's making, and it's like, dude, yes, like that is just stellar. And so that is also where I think localities and locality mutts play a huge role in the future of mainland retics, especially. You can really make some beautiful morph animals by incorporating locality blood. Again, it's a long process to do it, though, right? Like, it's not one or two breedings. It's multiple breedings over a decade to get to this animal. But again, my opinion, if you're breeding retics, you need to be in it for the long game anyways. Like, these animals are the definition of the long game.
Yeah. Literally and figuratively.
And figuratively. That's right.
And so, like, I kind of want to get your opinion on introducing the super dwarf and dwarf blood to try to make a certain phenotype smaller, or try to cross it with a mainland locality and then sort of sell it as something that is smaller or will be smaller as an adult. And do you
Go
Oh,
ahead.
go
No,
ahead.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, do you ever look at it from the opposite perspective where you want to try to breed a larger animal than would exist in nature?
So, I mean, number one, the longest recorded snake in the world, Guinness Book of World Records, is a pure Sula. It was just found, I don't know, six months ago or so.
Yeah.
I just shared a post about it on my story yesterday, I think. Um, so do I think that we can in captivity make a snake larger than what would occur in nature? Not necessarily, right?
Mm.
I actually don't. I genuinely believe even outside, outside Sulawesi, that other regions, that there are giant retics out there still, like in the jungles. And, honestly, I hope some of them are never found, because a lot of them, when they're found, they're killed, right?
Yeah.
Like, and they're either, made into boots or, whatever. However, do I think that we have the ability to make some retics that truly reach, you know, the potential that they could in the wild? I do. And that is a basis on, for some of the breedings that I do, right? For instance, the eggs I have in the incubator right now, that are pure Sula, they're from Valkyrie. Like I said, she's 19.7, and I bred her to a wild caught, one of the last wild caught Sulas left in this country, and he's 16 feet as a male. Those snakes will be big. There's zero question about it. They will be big. And what excites me about it is being able to hold some of those animals back and then cross them back with, say, like my Malay Sula female, right? Who is a little over 5.5 years old. And I haven't measured her, and I don't ever like to misquote or sort of give larger than realistic numbers. She is at least 17 and a half feet, at least. Yeah. And she's 5.5 years old, a little over 5.5 years old. That animal has a ton of growing left to do. I genuinely believe she will be over 20 feet, right? That she has the genetic potential to be that big. And so, like, am I gearing up to try and make some giants? Yeah, I am. And if for no other reason, then I want them, right? And I know a few other guys, like my one of my best friends, Paul Lucas, the retic keeper. He's on the exact same track that I am. He wants big retics. Guys like Travis Warren from Warren Reptiles, same thing. He wants big retics. And so, again, do I think we're going to make something that bigger necessarily than what you would find out in the natural world? No. But can we make some snakes that would hit that same size potential, like, and realistically be 22, 23 feet? Yeah. I think that we still have that ability, and I would certainly like to be part of at least creating something like that.
Yeah, that would be wild. So I do apologize. I think I asked you two questions in one. So go ahead. I could tell you wanted to address the first half of that question, which was about putting a mainland with a super dwarf and then kind of slinging it as a something that's going to be smaller. There has been a lot of this sort of marketing around the super dwarves and dwarves.
Yep.
And I feel like I started noticing that as the years went on. Like in the beginning, I'm like, wow, I'd really like to have a retic that only gets to be 5 feet long and is as big as a corn snake.
Yeah.
And then you kind of realize, like, well, that's not necessarily true. That's a 18-month-old animal or a 1-year-old animal. And you kind of get the sense that they were being sold as full-grown, maxed out adults.
So I take issue with the terms dwarf and super dwarf in general, and I always have. Okay. It is nothing but a marketing term. Now, that is not to say that I do not believe that insular dwarfism exists in reticulated pythons. I do believe it exists. However, and I've had a number of debates with people over the years. You cannot take a 2-year-old super dwarf male that is 5 or 6 feet long and breed it to a 14-foot, 4-year-old female and make a single claim, any type of claim, about what the size of those animals is going to be. You cannot do it. You have no idea. Number one, neither one of those animals is full grown. Okay? They have not reached their genetic potential. So that's one aspect. Number two, and this is something that came up recently, and it hasn't come to fruition. There is a absolute that one of the largest factors in an animal reaching its genetic potential is food intake. Okay? Just like humans, right? We are born with a predetermined frame, right? Like I am 6'1", and my frame is what it is, right? I cannot make my frame bigger short of, again, sure, there's ways, surgeries and stuff like that, but naturally I can't make my frame bigger. I can pack more weight on my frame, but I cannot make myself taller. I can't make my bone structure bigger. It's no different. And now there's the argument that, reptiles have indeterminate growth. Well, I disagree with that. Okay. Just because you keep feeding a snake forever does not mean that it's just going to keep growing. At a certain point, it's going to tap out. It's not going to grow any longer, and you're just going to continue to put weight on it. Weight doesn't necessarily equal size, right? So my point with that is, if you take 2 snakes from the exact same clutch and you give them to 2 different keepers who feed very different ways, those snakes not only are going to grow differently, but I believe that their final size will also be dictated by how they're fed, right? And I've seen this with mainland retics that I've acquired at 3, 4, 5 years old that came to me eating extra large or jumbo rats. And within 2 years of being with me, they're eating 6, 7, 8 pound rabbits. They were never fed to hit their genetic potential, right? And when you're talking about retic breeders, if you're keeping 20 plus retics, right? And your main purpose in keeping those retics is to breed, you are not trying to have those animals hit their absolute genetic max potential. You're feeding them and caring for them to keep them healthy, to breed them. And more than likely, you're turning those animals over, right? They're not staying with you for 10 years. And so you have no idea what that snake's potential really is. And this is where I take real issue with the terms dwarf and super dwarf, because you're talking about percentages of locality animals, some of which stay smaller and some of which don't, right? And I'll use my girl Diamond as an example. Diamond is 25% Jampea. Jampea is marketed as a dwarf locality. Now, she's not 100% Jamp, okay? However, there are 100% Jamps that existed at one point in time that were not small snakes at all, right? And so the term dwarf and super dwarf is extremely misleading. It needs to be based on the actual locality. Now, do I believe that there are localities out there that stay smaller? Absolutely. I do. I know that for a fact, right? A Sula and a Karampa, not the same. Not at all, right? And in their pure form. Now, if you breed a Karampa to a Sula, who knows what they're going to be, right? Yeah. Even if both animals are full grown, right? And and, 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 they're adult animals, and I'm talking they're 10 years old. there's no way to know, because of what you're crossing, which genetics are going to be more dominant in that in a specific animal. And even within a clutch, you're going to have extreme variation, right? Now, this is where, and I get back kind of on my soapbox about inbreeding. If you take said animals from that breeding and then breed them back together, right? And you're inbreeding them, can you now start to predict more of what the size is going to be? Only if those animals are actually mature, right? If each one of them is 3 or 4 years old, you don't know what it's going to be. You just don't. And that's where, I think there is a lot of misleading information around size, and size potential with the dwarf and super dwarf labels. To answer your second question, do I have any interest in doing that? I have no interest in small retics, zero. And there was sort of some, I don't want to call it drama, but there was something that popped off several months ago, where Garrett Hartle made, well, he didn't make the claims. Someone at his company made some claims about an animal he produced. I made a video about it, issued him a challenge. Garrett and I talked about it. Nothing's come of it at this point. I don't know if anything will. But what we were talking about was him sending me one of the animals in question and letting me raise it, right? Because his opinion was, well, this animal is going to stay a certain size. And my opinion was, well, I don't think you actually can say that. I don't think that you know that. And I think a lot of it depends on the food intake that you give the animal. And I would be willing to put that to the test, right? And again, nothing's come of that. And if nothing ever does, that's totally fine. But I think there needs to be more actual controlled experiments done with certain localities, especially that are marketed to stay smaller. And they need to be done by people whose best interest they need to be marketed, or the experiments need to be conducted by people who don't have really sort of, they don't have any.
It has to be a third party.
It has to be somebody who has no skin in the game, right?
Yeah.
For that, if the animal stays small, okay, it stays small, and if it doesn't stay small, it's not going to hurt their program, right?
Yeah.
Because again, this is where it comes down to breeding and everything else, and like you touched on earlier, ethics, right? That all plays a huge part.
I mean, is your primary concern that somebody's going to say, "Oh my goodness, I can get a Sulawesi, outcrossed animal, and it's going to max out at 8 feet, and I can keep it in a 6x2, and it's going to be great." And then here they are, maybe this, we'll say maybe like a novice keeper, somebody that doesn't have a ton of experience, and they end up with this potentially really large snake. I mean, and I would consider something 12 feet, and a Sulawesi has a very heavy body as well. So it could really put on some substantial weight with that length as well.
Yes. And more than that, if you underfeed a Sula, that's a dangerous animal, period. That's a dangerous animal. It will never be an animal that is predictable or calm or any of the things we want them to be, right? And I can say that from experience. I have a couple of Sulas here right now that recently came to me. They're not neglected. They weren't malnourished, but they were not fed the way they needed to be. And their attitudes when I got them, and I actually did a video on it not long after I got them, and I showed how reactive they were, how they're hungry, right? They're hungry. They want food. These animals now, those Sulas have been here for almost 2 months, calm as can be, because I have significantly upped their food intake, right? They're super easy to work with now, no problem. And that also, again, falls into the entire realm of how are you feeding them, right? And I've said this for years. You cannot raise a mainland retic on rats. Now,
Hmm.
doesn't mean people don't do it, but it is not adequate for them. And it's why if you see a 5-6-year-old retic that's 12, 13 feet long, and every time you go to open its cage, it's, coming out, flying out, mouth open. It's not because it's aggressive. It's hungry. Like, give it more food and watch what happens. And again, yes, can you overdo food intake? Of course you can. Like anything else, there's a balance. At the same time, if you pay attention to your snakes and their behavior, they will tell you very clearly when they need food and when they don't. And
Walk me through your philosophy for feeding, because this is something that I see it with people that keep retics, that they're like, oh man, my snake is always hungry, and they feed it, and then you kind of, in the back of my mind, I'm like, I'm concerned that they are just continuously feeding, and they're just going to end up with a really large snake that is going to always have a strong feed response. But in essence, that's sort of what a retic is, right?
in many ways, yes. Number one, no two snakes, no two retics eat the same. They don't. Okay. And if you try to feed them all the same, you're not going to have, I'm not going to say you're not going to have great results. You're not going to have optimal results. Okay. And so it comes down to the individual animal, their metabolism. And so again, I'm going to hone in on Sulas for a second. The metabolic rate of a Sula is higher than anything I've ever seen on any other type of retic. Okay. From the time they come out as babies. And so this is something that I learned with my first clutch of pure Sulas. I was of the mindset with babies when I hatched babies out, I'm not force feeding, right? Not going to do it. They either eat on their own and they thrive, or they don't, right? Not going to do it. If you do that with pure Sulas, you're going to lose a ton of them because their metabolism is so fast and I'm going to say extreme. They will literally burn themselves up. If they're not eating within the first couple of weeks on their own, you have to force feed them. You have to. Even these 75%ers, same thing. And so when it comes to feeding, number one, you've got to pay attention to your animal, the individual animal. Number two, you have to look at the genetic potential of the animal. And again, your goal should be to help that animal in any way that you can reach its genetic potential. Okay. And so like with my obviously larger mainlands, one of the things for me is I want them off of rats as soon as possible. Rats are a terrible source of nutrition for retics for a number of reasons. There's not enough fat. There's not enough calcium. There's just not enough nutrients in them. Okay. Now, I'm not going to say that they're not for other species. Okay. For instance, boas, you can't feed boas, from what I remember when I kept them, prey that's super, that has a high fat content, right? They will get fat too easily. So like a guinea pig, not a good food source for a boa. Okay. But for a retic, amazing food source. Way denser bones, more calcium, way higher fat content, right? Muscle content in an animal matters, but for a retic, and this is purely, I'm going to say speculation and observation. Okay. I believe a lot of what fuels growth in retics is fat and calcium. Okay. Not just muscle, muscle structure, muscle meat. And so for me, when I see guys that are feeding, 3, 4, 5-year-old retics, rats, it's like, well, yeah, no wonder they look the way they do. No wonder they act the way that they do. And people are like, oh, well, I don't want them to get fat. I don't want them to get fat. It's really easy to keep a retic at a good body composition. It's not hard, right? I feed really big meals to my adults, but they only eat like at a max, I'm going to say absolute max 6 times a year. Like normally I would say my really big adult, like true adults that are, like Alice and Diamond, they eat 3-4 times a year, right? Like that's all that they need. And their body compositions are fantastic, right? Like they're not overweight at all. Now, I have made snakes overweight before because I was overfeeding, right? Because same thing, I didn't understand that at a certain point they hit their genetic potential for their length, and they're not gonna put any more calories into growing longer. They're just gonna start storing it, right? And I've had that happen, and I've had snakes, and Diamond's actually a perfect example. I overfed Diamond, and she was very overweight, and she started slugging out completely. She had multiple slug clutches, and I had to spend a year slimming her down. Now, I did that through a different feeding method. I dropped her prey size significantly, and I fed her more frequently, right? So that her metabolism kept going. She wasn't storing anything. And again, that is another way you can feed retics. There's no necessarily right way in terms of frequency or prey size or whatever. It's what works for you as a keeper, right? And for me, partially because of my work and travel schedule, with my adults, it works better for me and for my snakes to feed them larger meals less frequently, right? It just that works better. If I was, here every day, never went anywhere, I might look at something different. And again, my feeding methods have evolved over the years, but more than anything, the biggest factor is the individual animal and paying attention to it and what works for it. It just is.
Yeah. I have the other Malayo python, Timorensis.
Okay.
And, so I oscillate back and forth on thinking, God, am I feeding these guys way too much, or am I not feeding them enough?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and so, okay, here's an interesting question, actually. So Shane Costello from SC Constrictors, he has those retic Timor crosses. I wonder if you'd be allowed to have those.
No.
Because if there's any reticulated python in them, it's a no.
Yeah, trust me, because I wanted a berm ball. Because I really like Burmese pythons, and I was hoping I could find a loophole with hybrids, but they explicitly say in the legislation that you cannot have hybrids.
Got it. Okay.
It's bullshit.
Yeah, it is. It is. Absolutely is. Okay. That just came to me when you said that, because I didn't know you kept Timors, but
yeah, they're super cool animals. But my female has such an insane food response, man. And it makes me wonder if I need to feed her, more often. But at the same time, I don't want her to get, enormous and obese to the point where I'm not going to be able to breed her, I want to be able to successfully breed them.
Sure. And I also think, again, my opinion, obesity doesn't happen quickly in snakes. Sure. It happens over an extended period of time. And again, of repeated overfeeding where you're not paying attention to the animal. Right.
Yeah. Just like us.
1,000%, dude. I mean, look, very few people that are significantly overweight gained 100 pounds in a year.
Yeah.
They gained 5 to 10 pounds over 5 to 7 years. Right. And that first year or two, it was like, okay, I gained a couple pounds, no big deal. It wasn't until year 3, 4, 5 that they're like, oh, I'm starting to be overweight. And by year 7, 8, 9, they're like, oh, I'm fat. Right.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, it's happened to me throughout my life. It happens slowly and incrementally. And then you see a picture of yourself and you're like, shit, what have I done?
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. So it's the same concept, man. So, again, and look, I get the fear around having an obese snake. I totally understand it. I also, from my experience, like I said, like number one, you can reverse it. It is possible to reverse. Number two, my belief is if you're paying attention to your animals the way that you should be, it's not going to happen because you'll see them trending. And here's the thing. And again, I have no experience with Timor pythons, so I'm not trying to say that this works. With retics, I can tell when they are getting way less hungry, right?
Mm.
If one of my retics, if I throw food in the cage and it kind of and sniffs at it, if it doesn't come at it and grab it and coil it up the way a retic should, it's like, okay, they're not that hungry. I'm probably teetering on I'm overfeeding, right?
Mm.
My snakes, when it's feeding time, dude, they're ready to eat. Like they're no question. There's no half-assedness with it. And now some people will say, well, retic will just eat as much as you feed it. To a point, that's true, especially when they're growing, right? But that's also, I think, a big misconception. People are like, oh, they grow till they're 5-7 years old. Bullshit. They will grow past 10 years old. And Valkyrie is a perfect example of it. So when I measured her in 2023, she was right at 19 feet. When she just got measured again, she's 19.7. Now, is that extreme growth? No. But 7 inches in 3 years is still growth, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think she's done. I think she will continue to grow incrementally like that for another couple of years.
Interesting. And so how do you feed your babies for their first year of life?
So I start, unless a hatchling comes out significantly small, I start them on rat pups. That's what I start them on. And really it depends on them, right? On how quickly they take food and how quickly they will adapt to frozen thaw. I start all my babies on live. It's just, starting them on frozen thawed, in my experience, takes way too long. I'd rather get them eating quicker and then move them to frozen thawed. That's an easier transition to me. And so once I get them on frozen thawed, I am going to bump them up to a small as soon as possible. And at the point that I look at them and say, you could take 2 smalls, they're going to a medium. And from a medium to a large. And once they hit a large, I'm going to move them to any other prey source that I can. Rabbit pinks, guinea pigs, anything to get them off of the rats, right? I've had 1-year-old snakes taking rabbit pinks like clockwork. And that's a beautiful thing because, number one, when then the transition, then there is no more transition to get them to go to rabbits, right? Part of why I want them off rats as soon as possible and taking other forms of prey is so that it's not such a hard transition. If you feed a snake the same thing over and over and over and over again for years on end, getting them to switch, yeah, why would they want to switch? This is what they're used to, right? Give me what I'm used to. And then you get into the whole thing of, people having to go to the extreme of having to sew a rat body onto, the head of a rabbit.
Jesus.
It's like, no. We're not doing all that, right? And this is where, I will, and I do stand on this. This is where you use a retic's their hunger drive, their food drive against them.
Yeah.
And if I have a really stubborn retic that doesn't want to switch, I'll hold them off food for way longer than they would normally go. And yeah, they get really reactive and they're a pain to deal with. But guess what? When I go to offer food the next time, they're going to take it because they're hungry. They stop being picky about what it is. They just want to eat. So, I don't necessarily have a set timeline, man, because like I said, it depends on each individual animal. But my goal is always off of rats as soon as possible.
Okay. Right on. Yeah. I feed my Timor, I think every 3 weeks.
Okay.
Like a large rat every 3 weeks. And I don't know, like this time of year, maybe with it being warmer, the house is warmer and everything. I might need to kick that up to every 2 weeks, because it just seems like
Or
she's just so damn hungry.
Or give her two.
Mm.
Give her two. There's nothing wrong. So people are always asking me what I feed the big retics, right? And how I feed them large enough prey. Here's the deal. I don't go look for goats that often. Those are more difficult to find. I do not like pigs as feeders. I don't.
Why not?
Number one, there's no hair. And so it makes a mess coming out the other end. Okay. Especially if it's just a pig. Number two, pigs are rarely, they're rarely euthanized, right? They die. Something happened, right? And pigs, and again, from living in South Florida and hunting hogs, right? There is nothing dirtier than a damn hog. They're just
trichinosis.
The diseases that they carry and everything else. I just don't like them. And I've seen how quickly, so number one, the way that I feed, I defrost everything overnight in my facility. So my facility, like right now, it's 77 degrees in here. Okay. It stays between, regardless of the time of year, it stays between about 73 and 78. So when I feed, I pull everything out, I lay it on tables, and I leave it out overnight. The only thing that will go bad faster than a pig is a rat, right? Rats will go bad real quick. Pigs go bad really quick. And I've had it happen where I've, pulled stuff out the night before and it's taking me longer to get back to the facility than I planned. And I come in and I'm looking at some of these pigs and I'm like, there's no way I'm feeding that. I can tell that's rotten. Now, can the snakes technically eat it? Sure. However, and this is something that it also is not talked about, there are a number of diseases, bacterial infections that these snakes can contract from their prey, and it won't kill them, but they will live with that bacterial infection for years, sometimes on end. And then they get something like a little RI. Well, that underlying bacterial infection flares up, combines with the RI, boom, that snake's gone. So I'm careful in that regard. But my point with all that, my big snakes will eat multiple rabbits at a time, right? So if I want to feed a 19-foot snake, I may not have more than one 10-pound rabbit, but I've got a plethora of 6 to 8 pound rabbits. Cool. Here's 3 8-pound rabbits, 4 8-pound rabbits, right? Boom, one after the other, after the other. Part of the reason they'll do that is conditioning, right? When they're younger, I'll feed them multiple rats. I'll feed them multiple guinea pigs so they get used to taking multiple prey items in one sitting. And again, to me, sometimes that's easier, right, than bumping up the prey size, right? Just give them more than one. And that's advice I give to retic keepers all the time. They're like, well, same thing. They're like, well, I'm giving my 2-year-old, a large rat every 2 or 3 weeks. Cool. How big's the lump? Well, it's a little bit bigger than its body. How long is it there for? A day? Yeah. Give them 2. Watch what happens. Give them 3. Watch what happens. Right. And again, if you go back to what these snakes do in the wild, right? And granted, I understand we're not dealing with wild snakes. They're captive bred. However, the capability that they have, look at the berms that we see pictures of in Florida, right? Look at the retics we see pictures of coming out of Indo, where they're so swollen they can't move. Yeah. Right? They're so big they can't move. Now, am I saying that that's the way we should feed these snakes all the time? No, but it can be done, right? They absolutely have the potential to take very large meals in one sitting. And if they're conditioned to it, it's perfectly fine. Now, again, if you're going to do that, you need to space your feedings out more. And I say this all the time. Watch your retics behavior. So, perfect example. I got a cow down here that I made. Actually, yeah, you can see her right there in the corner.
Oh, yeah.
So she's a 2023. That snake, for whatever reason, from the time she hatched out, she wants more food than most retics I've encountered, right? And she's very informative about it. Right now, she's coiled up in the corner. She's still finishing digesting her last meal. And that was going on 2 weeks ago. Okay. I'm waiting for her to go into a shed cycle, shed, shit. The day after, she's going to be hunting her cage. She's going to be looking for more food. And if I don't give it to her within a couple of days, she will start pushing her face off. She will start smashing into the corners, into the glass. Just every time I come in here, she's hunting. If your retic is doing that, and again, I'm not speaking on other species. If your retic is doing that, it's for one reason. They want food. Give them food and watch how much they calm down, right? If they're satiated, they're not actively hunting. If they're actively hunting, it's because they're hungry.
Since we're on the topic of feeding, how do you cycle your animals to get them to breed? Are you using food, temperature, humidity, light? Well, like what are your triggers that you get them to go?
So there's a few different things. Number one, if the animal, and this is for females, so males, males obviously don't cycle for breeding, but with males, it's very specific. If I know I'm going to use a male for breeding, I will up his food intake a little bit prior to breeding season to get some extra calories in him. And when it's close to breeding season, I put his temperature at a consistent 84. There's no hot and cold side. It's just 84 degrees. That's where he is. And he's there throughout the breeding cycle in his cage. The females, there's a few different things.
Both sides, it's just 84.
84 ambient, period.
All day.
84 degrees.
All night.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I don't change them at all.
Okay.
With females, it depends on where the female is. So if the female is in a higher cage, I will put her in a lower cage, number one. Number two, I with localities, you have to temp cycle. You have to. If you just try to shove them full of food to get them to cycle, doesn't work. Okay. And so I absolutely temp cycle the locality females. And I will start that. So I will start feeding them either larger meals or smaller, more frequent meals through the end of the summer into the early fall. And then when I'm getting closer to wanting them to cycle, I'll start night dropping their temps. Okay. So drop their temps at night into the low 70s and then bring them back up to about 80 in the daytime and just let that cycle. I don't mess with the light. Well, so all of my lights in this facility are on automatic timers, and it goes with they come on at sunrise, they go off at sunset, no matter the time of year. Okay. So technically I am cycling the lights, right? But that's just a consistent thing. They get more light in the summer and they get less light in the winter. But temps are definitely something. Humidity, I try to keep my humidity pretty consistent. Within the cages, you can see the watermarks on the cages now. I try to keep ambient humidity in the cages at least 70%. Even when they're on paper, these are rainforest animals. They need high humidity. And the easiest way to know for me if a retic is at the proper humidity and proper hydration levels, what's their shed look like? If their sheds are coming off in a million pieces, they're dehydrated, right? And part of that is their environment. If they're shedding in, even the big snakes, I have complete sheds from some of my 16, 17 foot snakes, right?
Wow.
One piece rolled off perfectly. That's a well-hydrated animal, right? That goes back to health and husbandry. But in terms of breeding, so yeah, I'll move a female to the bottom cage. If she's already in a bottom cage, she stays there. I will night cycle their temps. And basically when I know that they're ready is when I go to offer them food and they say no. Now, I know there are some guys out there that feed their females during breeding and even during, gestation. I do not. I think that can create more issues than it's worth doing. And if you feed your female up properly, she doesn't need to eat.
Mm.
Like she can go, you know, they can go, adults can go a year without eating if they have the proper body comp going into it. You know, like I said, Valkyrie, she just ate 2 weeks ago. I gave her one small 2-pound rabbit just to see how she reacted to it, and she gobbled it down, which is, you know, a great sign. But prior to that, her last meal was August.
Wow.
Like she's still fine, you know.
Yeah.
Now, and I won't feed her, even when I feed her, you know, I'm gonna say a regular size meal. I won't feed her a giant meal because of the surgery she had and the stitches and everything else. I want to make sure everything heals properly. I gave her that small 2-pound rabbit just because I was feeding everything else, and it was very clear to me again through her behavior she wanted food. And it was like, all right, girl, like let's see what this does. Let's give you this little tiny guy and just see how you do with it. And boom, she smashed it. Which again, to me, one of the clearest indicators of health in a retic. If your retic isn't eating, there's something wrong. And that's why, you know, no matter how many snakes I've had over the years, no matter what my travel or work schedule's been, that's something that I always do personally. I always do all the feeding on all of my animals, because that's one of my easiest ways to keep track of, are they healthy, right? Like if they're not eating, there's something wrong and I need to check it out.
Interesting. And how do you, well, actually real quick on night drops, what are your temperatures, during, like, for the night drops? Like what are they going down to?
So it depends on the locality. At a minimum, the low 70s, like that's at a minimum. There are other localities that I will drop a little bit further than that. It also depends on the snake, right? For whatever reason, certain snakes tend to be a little bit more prone to getting RIs than others. And so again, knowing your animals and just knowing, you know, what their capabilities are and sort of what their thresholds are. But yeah, I mean, generally high, you know, low 70s, mid 70s. And then during the day, like I said, I'll bring them back up to 80, sometimes a little bit warmer than that. But never over like 82. And that's worked very well for me. So, and I know there's some guys that never temp cycle. Most of those guys tend to run ambient heat in their facilities, which I could do. I don't like to. I like to have more control than that. So every single cage that I have has at least one RHP in it. Most of them have two.
Yeah, I can see that in the cages behind you. You have one on both sides, which is pretty incredible. And what kind of lights are you using? UV lights or just regular tubes or LEDs?
All the cages that I have now are just standard LED lights. I hadn't put a whole lot of I guess stock in UVB lights for retics, but there's some things that have come out in the last couple of years that have shown that it can be beneficial. So the two new cages that I'm waiting on from Mark at Jungle Cages. So they're 11 feet long, they're 4 foot deep, and they're 3 foot high.
Holy shit, man.
So basically imagine, so this 4 stack behind me, imagine that was 2 cages basically.
Yeah.
And in those cages, and I went all out on these. So they have a built-in sort of like water pond with a drain on the side.
Nice.
So the bottom half of the cage is 12 inches deep, right? So the bottom half of the cage will be all substrate. And then there's a divider for the pond. There's a basking shelf on the opposite corner, which will have a UVB fixture above it, along with an RHP for a basking spot. And then I'll have another smaller RHP on the other side. Just when you get, part of the reason I have two, like these 10-foot cages behind me, if I just have one heat panel on one side, the temperature gradient in those cages is pretty significant, right? And so I run the Herbstat 6s on pretty much everything, right? And so I'll run one side at the heat on one side at about 80, and I'll run the other side at about 85. And I find that gives me a good enough gradient to, you know, for them to self-regulate. It also gives me the ability, If I have a snake that, develops an RI, I can crank one side up to like 88 and put the other side up to like 83, 84, and just keep that snake warmer the entire time. Right. So it just gives me more control.
Do you, like, how do you deal with biosecurity in these giant animals and, having gone through sort of a couple different iterations of your collection? Do you, when an RI comes up, do you test for NITO or do you?
I test my entire collection once a year.
Really?
Yeah. Dude. So when I'll say this, when I had 60, 70 retics, I would go through and pull 12 to 15 swabs a year and send them in. Is it an expense? Yes. Is it worth it? Yes. And it's how I can say with confidence, and this has come up. I have wholesaled baby retics before to people, right? Where they'll buy 5 or 10 from me and they'll resell them. I have also sent snakes with certain people to shows that I wasn't going to attend to sell for me. And 2 years ago, a young lady bought a snake from a friend of mine that was one I had produced. That snake hadn't been in my facility for a month. So I had given it to the friend. They were doing a series of shows. And I said, here's a couple animals, put them on your table, whatever. This young lady bought the snake, took it home. In the course of 4 or 5 weeks, she bought a total of 4 retics, right?
Jeez.
This retic from me developed an RI. She took it into the vet. They tested it. It tested positive for NITO. She went to the forums and blasted me, saying I sold them a sick snake, blah, blah, blah. I literally pulled my results from the last round of testing, and I just posted them and said, show me how I have NITO. Show me how.
Yeah. That
snake hasn't been in my facility for a month. It was at multiple shows. I'm really sorry this happened to you. However, I did not, number one, I didn't sell you the snake. Number two, the person that sold the snake to you didn't have NITO in their collection either. Okay. Yeah. And I know that. Where the NITO came from, how many shows did you go to? How many animals did you touch? Right? How many other animals? Obviously, you bought other retics. Did you test the rest of those retics? Well, no. Okay. So for me, number one, I want to know, right? And it's such a simple test. It's so easy to do. Even adult snakes that I sell, a lot of times before I sell them, I will swab them and send it in, and then send the person that's buying it, hey, here's your clean bill of health, right?
Yeah.
Letting you know what if you have something in your collection, it didn't come from me.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's a lot of people are out there being fast and loose and picking up animals and their quarantine is trash, and it's really hard to figure out where to point the finger when an unfortunate thing like that comes up,
Well, here's the biggest issue, and I think the biggest proponent of diseases in the industry comes from shows. Like,
oh yeah,
there are, and partially because they're not even breeders. You have flippers that just pick up animals wholesale, right? Sometimes wild caught. Exactly that. Not doing proper quarantine, proper testing, bringing them to shows, having them coexisting on a table with all kinds of other animals, touching those animals, touching other animals, boom, and it just goes. And even, and it's shows are a necessary part for breeders, right? They just are. But even having hand sanitizer on your table and making sure every single person, sanitizes their hands, is that really going to kill NITO? Probably not, right?
Yeah. Or is your contact time sufficient? Is there enough of the disinfectant? Yeah, there's so many factors there.
Yeah. So, but frankly, I look at it again as an ethics thing and as a responsibility thing. If you are actively breeding and actively selling snakes or reptiles in general, right? you should be taking the initiative within your own collection on some type of periodic basis, right? And for me, like I said, it's once a year. And actually that, it's usually during the summer that I do it. And I will literally, and I've probably got a box still of, I don't know, 60, 70 swabs. I mean, the kits are not expensive, right? And I mean, it's $60 a test. But for me, again, especially as I'm bringing in, like I said, I brought in a couple new snakes recently, right? Now, I have no reason to suspect that they have anything. I'm still going to test them, right?
Yeah.
That $60 that I test that snake and it comes back with a clean bill of health, it's like, okay, I'm good, right? I don't have to worry about anything with this animal, especially if, in this instance, some of those animals might not stay here. And if they don't, I want to be able to say with 100% certainty, hey, that animal was clean when it left my facility.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so important that if symptoms come up to test then, because I know a lot of animals can just have dormant virus in their bodies and test negative, I mean, and Dr. Tillis told me this story that he had a blood python in a sort of a secure area, like a biosecure area, had tested this animal numerous times, went through breeding season. The animal was paired up. All of a sudden, there was a slight bit of mucus. He grabbed a swab, tested positive.
Yep.
And that was years of this animal being in a closed collection and never showing any symptoms, right?
Yep.
And that's something that Dr. Tillis says as well as, sick snakes make sick snakes.
Correct.
So if you have symptoms, there's a potential that it might not be a bacterial illness. It may be a secondary bacterial infection that's coming from a dormant virus that is now showing symptomatically.
Yep. 100%. And that's, if I have a snake that comes down with something in my collection, I'm very diligent about what happens with that animal. I will make sure, like, if it's a cleaning day, every other animal in my collection gets cleaned first. Then I deal with the one that's got an illness, and I'll have a specific container. Like sometimes, depending on the severity, I'll go buy a brand new tote and only use it for that sick snake. And then when I'm done with it, I will either throw it away or, use it for something other than snakes. Right.
Yeah.
And no other snake goes in that container. It's no different with mites, right? A lot of people are like, well, so for instance, I brought in 3 snakes about 2 months ago. A friend of mine got completely out of the hobby, sold all of his, got rid of all of his retics. And I took a couple of them for him. And he told me up front, he was like, hey, this snake I know for sure has mites. I'm sorry. I've not been able to get rid of them. I know it has mites. Okay, no problem. Most people would look at my setup and be like, where's your quarantine? Well, I don't really have one. And here's the reason why. Now, I did put all those snakes in one specific stack over here. It's away from my other ones. And I can't see it, but I've got a giant 36-inch fan up here behind me that blows all the air that way out of my facility. So nothing's coming from those cages this way into my facility, right? The other part is my protocols just in general. I've never had a mite outbreak in my collection because of what I do. And people constantly asking me, why do you soak your snakes so much? Right? Well, number one, I'm in a desert environment. The natural environment here in Utah is about as non-conducive to these animals as it could get, right? It gets really hot. It's really dry. Like ambient humidity most of the time is in the 20 to 30%, right? It's terribly low.
Yeah.
So I soak my snakes, one, for hydration. Number two, I put iodine in every single soak for 2 reasons. One, iodine cleanses their skin. Okay. People are always talking about, you can get salmonella from handling reptiles because of their feces. Actually, salmonella is more rare than E. coli, right? If they crawl around in their own feces, that's E. coli more than it is salmonella. So one, iodine cleanses their skin. Number two, iodine helps kill mites. And I learned that years and years and years ago, back in my early days of keeping. And it's just something I've always done, warm water and iodine. And that combined with if I know a snake has mites, okay, put it on paper. And that's why you see paper behind me in a bunch of these cages, because I knew that a snake I brought in had mites. Okay, put everything on paper, because mites on paper, you're going to see them, number one. Number two, they're going to die, right? They're not going to live in the bedding. And three, I do still use things like pest strips, like the no pest strips. And yes, it's a chemical. No, it's not great. I don't use them all the time because, again, if you use something all the time, things can become resistant to it. But I do use them in cases like this. And that snake in particular, it actually just left a couple of days ago. It's mite free, and I know that. I know that for a fact. So it's just not something. To me, if your husbandry is where it needs to be, you don't have to worry about things like that.
Do you ever use NexGard? Have you heard about that? It seems like a lot of people have been using that to treat mites now.
Is that the spray?
No, it's the oral. I can't remember the name of the actual medication. It's like an oral flea and tick treatment for dogs, and people have been using that. Alex Carr used it, and it wiped it right out.
I'm sure it works, right? I don't even like using that stuff on my dogs, right? I feel like there's too many other chemical compounds and whatnot. Even with my dogs for years, I've just bought bottles of permethrin and mixed up my own spray, and I'll spray them down. I've never had an issue with fleas in my dogs, ticks, very, very rarely. But one of the other things I will do if I know, and so actually I did a video on this not that long ago, pretty much all coconut husk bedding, at some point you're going to get bugs in it. And it's generally a wood mite, right? Now, it's not a mite that will hurt the snake, but they will get on the snakes, right? And I'm sure, like, just like us, you got bugs crawling on you, it's uncomfortable, right? Yeah. It's not enjoyable. And so something I will do in addition, especially if I see wood mites, I will get the snake out and I will coat it in mineral oil. I'll take mineral oil, pour it into a bowl, take my gloves, dip them in it, and just run my hands down the snake and coat the snake. Now, that will make their skin start, their outer layer of skin start to flake off a little bit, but the oil suffocates the mites. They can't live in that. And so then when the snake sheds, it sheds all that off, and it's perfect.
Wow. Interesting. So we'll get wrapped up here pretty soon. But before we go, I kind of wanted to ask you about, I know that you've gone through some, personal, difficulties, and you've gone through some really difficult situations. Yep. And how did keeping the snakes get you through that? And kind of tell me that story. I want to hear it.
Okay. So when I was in Colorado, I was a cannabis cultivator and cannabis consultant. So I moved to Colorado to get into the industry. And I was pretty successful at it. I was a licensed medical cultivator. And in 2018, there was a shift at the federal level in terms of how cannabis was treated. And in 2018, my facility, my home, the storage unit I had, basically anything that was attached to my name was raided by both state and federal authorities.
Even though you were doing everything above board, everything was legal.
Everything was legal. I made one mistake. So I had multiple licenses. I was a medical cultivator. I had multiple licenses. I had let one license lapse. And that was the loophole that they caught me on. Okay. At the state level. At the federal level, cannabis, until just recently, was a Schedule I narcotic, right? Illegal, period. Didn't matter. And federal law will always trump state law. What happened in Colorado in 2018, the feds would roll in, they would enforce federal law, and under federal law, cannabis anything was illegal. So they could press federal charges, and what it meant was that any assets you had were seizable. Okay? Under federal civil asset seizure law. And that's why it happened to me. So I got wrapped up into an 11-person RICO case. I was charged with 7 different felonies.
Jeez.
And I spent basically 13 months in a legal battle with both the feds and the state of Colorado. And ultimately, I took a plea deal. And really and truly, what it was a money grab. I all in, it cost me over 7 figures.
Jeez.
It cost me my livelihood. And an immense amount of personal stress and turmoil. And what was interesting was this was right about the time that I had started Wildfire. I'd started the channels. I was really actively breeding. And when everything happened and I got raided, there was a lot of confusion around it. Like, I got raided in one day. I was not arrested. I was not indicted. I got raided and everybody disappeared. Now, at my facility, they took every single grow light that I had. They cut every single plant that I had. They took most of my grow equipment. They took any asset I had that had a title. Vehicles, trailers, ATVs, took it all.
Wow.
And then they went away. They literally went completely radio silent. There was nothing for 8 weeks. And then the DEA showed back up at my doorstep with a warrant and indictments 8 weeks later. In that time period.
Can I ask what that was like? Like when they came, did they handcuff you? Is it they just hand you a piece of paper?
So I happened to be out of state when it happened. I wasn't home. They thought I was. And when they went to my home and raided my home, they battery ran my door, destroyed my house, like destroyed it, broke mattress frames, cut the couch open. Like, they fucked my house up, which of course insurance didn't cover any of, right? And they impounded my dogs, tased one of my dogs. Thank God they didn't shoot them. That to this day, I will give them credit. You know, I had 100+ pound pit bulls and they didn't shoot them. And I'm very grateful that they didn't. But I wasn't home. And all of a sudden, I was in a hotel room out of state and my phone started going off at 6 o'clock in the morning with alarms. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? And I'm looking at my cameras and my cameras are down. And there was one camera I had mounted way up high on the ceiling of my facility, and the ceilings were 14 feet. And there was smoke from flashbangs and everything in the facility. And I'm like, what the fuck is, like, I thought I was getting robbed, right? Like, that's what I thought. And the smoke finally starts to clear, and I see a guy walk in, and very clearly, back of his jacket, DEA. And I was just like, oh fuck, like this is not good. One of the things when you're in the cannabis industry, you have multiple lawyers. You have to, because of the nature of the industry and everything else. And I called one of my attorneys and I just said, I'm being raided. And he's like, what? Like, I'm looking at the camera. DEA is everywhere. And he's like, where are you? And I was in Utah, funny enough, at that point. I was like, I'm in Utah. And he's like, okay, well, if it's DEA, they know where you're at. Like, be ready for a knock. Okay. So I kind of waited around for an hour. Nothing happened. Called him back. He was like, I guess get on a plane and come home. Like, get back here, come to the office. So I got on a plane. I'm texting my employees like, hey, don't go to the facility. Like, go nowhere near it. You may get a knock on your door. I'm texting my girlfriend, like, where are you? She had gone to her mom's for the night. And I told her, like, hey, go to the house. Because at this point, I had no idea. I had no cameras or anything around my house because I had nothing in my house. I just lived there, right? Never, ever occurred to me that they would go to my house. So I'm telling her, like, hey, go to the house, get the dogs, grab the cash, like, get everything you can out of the house and go back to your mom's. And she's texting me on the plane. And she was about 3 miles from the house. And she texted me. She's like, Weston, they went to the house. I just passed your truck on a flatbed.
What?
I was like, what the fuck? So I'm thinking as soon as I land, right, I'm going to walk off the plane and, they're going to be there waiting. And so I walk off the plane. I'm looking around. I'm waiting to hear my name. Nothing. Walk through the airport. Nothing. And I told my girlfriend, come to the airport and get me. So she did. Unfortunately, fortunately for me, I had driven one of my vehicles to the airport and put it in valet parking. So it was there, but I didn't want to get it. I just wanted to leave it there because if it had been at the house, they'd have taken it. And so went straight to my lawyer's office. And while I was on the plane, I got a voicemail, and it was from an unknown number, and I hadn't listened to it. And I got to my lawyer's office. I'm like, well, I got this voicemail. You want to listen to it? And he's like, yeah, play it. And I played it. And it was a DEA officer saying that they had served search warrants at my home, at my facility, at my storage unit, at my PO box, and that they would like to have a conversation with me. And so my lawyer was like, well, I'll call him. So he dials the number. Agent picks up and he says, yes, this is so-and-so. I'm the attorney for Weston Wenner. And, we understand that you serve search warrants at multiple locations today. And the agent was just like, yeah, do you know where he is? My lawyer was like, well, I do. However, I'm not required to tell you that unless he's under arrest. No, he's not under arrest. Okay, well, then can you give me any information on, what's happening here? And the agent just goes, yeah, we'd like to have a conversation with Mr. Wenner. And my lawyer was like, well, I'm his attorney, so you can have a conversation with me. And the agent just goes, yeah, we have no interest in talking to you. We'll talk to him, not you. And my attorney kind of laughed. He goes, that's not how that works. and the agent just goes, well, it is what it is. If he wants to talk to us, he knows how to reach us, and hangs up.
Wow.
And my attorney's just like, I don't even know what to say. Like, I don't even know what to say. I'm like, what do I do? Like, do I go home? Like what? He's like, they didn't say you're under arrest. He's like, I guess go home and, just be on the lookout. So I did. And again, they destroyed my house. So I go to my house, find out my dogs are impounded. So that's the first thing I do. I go get my dogs, come back to the house, couldn't close my front door because they battering rammed it. Had to take a piece of ply or a 2x4 and nail it into the door and into the trim to get it to close. And for about 2 days, I kind of did nothing. I didn't clean anything up. I just kind of stayed in my house, waiting, right? They have to be coming for me. And after 2 days, it was okay, nothing's happening. All right, I need to figure this out. And so started cleaning my house up, went to the facility, and the funniest thing, the one thing they did not touch, the snake tanks.
Yeah.
They didn't go near it. Not one thing. So the snakes were fine. And so my immediate thought was, I got to get rid of these snakes, right? I can't this. My income just got turned off overnight.
Yeah.
I have no business anymore. I got to get rid of these things. And so I called Paul, and and Paul knew what I did. And we had developed a pretty decent friendship at this point. And I was like, hey, you want to buy any of these snakes back from me? Cause I need to get rid of them. And he was like, what the fuck's going on? And I laid everything out. And he was like, dude, he's like, I'm just going to be honest with you. It's like, you've put a lot of time and a lot of money into this. He's like, maybe don't do that quite yet. Maybe don't, just completely pull the rug. I was like, I'm not telling you not to downsize, but just maybe don't pull the rug. And it was like, all right. And it was some of the best advice anybody ever gave me, because when you asked, your sort of your first question of how did the snakes, come into the picture with all this, they got me through it, dude. They gave me a purpose. For, most of 2018, I had no idea what was going to happen with my life, especially once I got indicted and, the cases were in motion. I was fighting the state case. I was fighting a federal case. And I had no idea what was going to go on. And the one thing that I had besides the gym is I had my snakes, and I could go to the facility. And at that point, obviously the grow was shut down. So I moved all of my snakes into a grow room, which funny enough, grow rooms are the perfect environment for reptiles. And so I moved them all into one of the rooms, and I would just go to the facility for hours at a time. And, not just cleaning, but just spending time with the snakes. And that's really when I started dialing in not only my husbandry, but my understanding of their behavior and how they reacted to different things. And really it was kind of a place of peace for me, because I could go there and just tune everything else out, right?
Mm.
Like get away from everything else, not worry about it, and just focus on that. And so, I ended up not really downsizing at all. And honestly kind of put more effort and more emphasis into the snakes and into Wildfire and building that whole thing. And that's when it really, really took off, was from 2018 to 2020. When, that part of my life really kind of shut down. And I settled my case in 2019. And I was in Colorado for a little over another year, and then I ended up moving to Utah. But the snakes were really I don't want to say a saving grace, but they were a major source of peace and solace for me during that time.
So you ended up with felonies from this?
I took a plea deal. I pled guilty. And this is where people are like, wait, what? I pled guilty to a 3rd-degree felony in the state of Colorado, which was cultivation over 30 plants in a state where cannabis is supposed to be legal.
And that's because your license had lapsed?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that was how they got me at the state level. They basically gave me the option. So the 7 felonies I was charged with ranged from violation of the Organized Crime Act of Colorado.
Oh my word.
To money laundering and tax evasion. And they basically said, you can pick the felony you want to plead to. You're going to plead to one.
Wow.
And I sat down with my attorneys and was like, okay, which one of these is the lesser of the evils? And so
you don't want no tax evasion. They got Martha Stewart on that.
Correct. And I didn't want to open myself up to IRS scrutiny and stuff like that. So I pled guilty to cultivation over 30 plants, which is a 3rd-degree felony in the state of Colorado.
Wow.
Yeah.
And but no prison time, right?
Not beyond when I was indicted, I went to prison not prison. I went to jail for a couple of days. But beyond that, no prison time. I was on probation for 4 years.
Jeez.
Yeah.
I bet you got to know your probation officer real well.
Yeah. Yep.
My buddy's a probation officer. He's a great guy.
Look, the thing that was amusing is as I went through the whole process and through all these different elements and the state authorities and people that I had to interact with all said the same thing. They're like, you are not the guy we're used to dealing with. And I was like, because I really wasn't trying to be a criminal.
Yeah.
So, but lessons learned, and as rough as a period as it was, ultimately it taught me a ton, and I'm honestly grateful for the lessons that it taught me. I've had to rebuild a lot, coming out of that, but that also showed me, kind of the adage, like it's not what you have, it's who you are. And, you can lose everything and rebuild. So.
God, I can't imagine the stress from being put through that. That must have been,
it was
incredibly,
a lot.
Yeah. That had to have been so overwhelming. Yeah.
It was a lot. It aged me a few years for sure.
I bet. My neighbor snitched on me to code enforcement. I could hardly handle that.
I've dealt with code enforcement too. Those guys are almost more difficult to deal with because they're on such a power trip, with what they're doing. And you're not really dealing with laws, right? You're dealing with code, which is a whole different one.
Yeah. Well, what's great for me is that the code enforcement officer knew exactly what my neighbor was doing.
Yeah.
And he knew that he was just being an asshole neighbor,
Sure. Sure.
And that helped a lot. That helped immensely.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and again, a lot of it is how you react to it, right?
Yeah.
Like if you fly off the handle and, act out all sorts of ways, it makes it more difficult on you. The more that keep your calm, keep your cool, and just try to walk through and be as reasonable as you can, even when the situation is unreasonable, it helps a lot.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The way I said to the code enforcement officer, I'm like, how do I get in compliance?
Yeah.
That's all I want to do.
Yep.
How do I get in compliance? And then we can move on from this. It helps that I work for the county too, so that kind of helped. And yeah, my neighbor's a jerk, but hopefully he never sees that. I try to keep my whole snake hobby secret from him because I don't want him. He could make things difficult, and he's already shown me that, and it's like,
it's a big reason why I do what I do with a facility like this. So this is rented space, right? This is a commercial rented space. I don't own it. I have had two different spots where I did own, the place where the snakes were. But those were both on acreage. They were out away from anybody. It was outside of city limits, just within the county, and there really wasn't anything anybody could complain about. Currently the house that I live in is in a subdivision. There's no HOA, which I would never live in an HOA period, but it's still within a subdivision. And initially when we moved into that house, I was thinking about putting all the snakes in the garage. We built a larger garage for that reason. And I'm really glad that I didn't, simply because all it takes is one neighbor, right? That has an issue with what you're doing. And, they call code enforcement, they call county officials, they call the cops. Like, it just, and this here, it's like nobody bothers me. Like, there's obviously I have neighbors, but I'm in an industrial area again, outside city limits. And it's like, nobody cares what I'm doing here. So,
yeah. It's, neighbors are a strange thing. They'll be your best friend until you don't fold over and do exactly what they want in a certain time frame. And then they can become your worst enemy very easily.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very easily. All right, man. Well, I appreciate you, dude. This was a lot of fun, and I've learned a lot, and I appreciate you, man. And I appreciate what you're doing in the hobby.
Oh, thank you, man. Like I said, happy to do it. Glad we finally got it arranged. And it's been fun talking to you.
Are you on TRT, dude? You're jacked out of your damn mind.
Yes, I am.
All right, I don't feel as bad now.
No. So, I mean, I've been on TRT since I was 29. And I also this is not something I'm shy about, man. Like, I talk about it publicly. I've been on TRT since I was 29. When I was 29, I got my levels checked and I was like 348. And the only time that I've come off in the last 12, 13 years was 2023 into 2024, so that my wife could get pregnant. Can't when you're on TRT for that long, your swimmers do not work. So I had to do some hormone therapy and everything like that. But yeah, I am on TRT. And I cycle through some different peptides. Most of them are repair peptides. I'm 42, dude, and I've beat the shit out of my body over the years. And so I take a number of peptides on and off. Not really on anything. I'm only on two of them right now, BPC 157 and TB 500. And then some melanotan 2, which that actually helps more with skin and melanin production than anything. But I've done cycles of anabolic steroids in the past. I haven't done a cycle in well over 10 years, but I mean, at this point in life, man, it's really just about consistency in the gym. So,
yeah.
And if you watch my,
I had to ask because every time I see, I'm like, damn, his shoulders are huge, man. You know, like, and I'm like, I wonder if it's TRT or if it's just, you know, genetics and hard work. I mean, obviously hard work is always the key factor there.
Yeah, man. I mean, you know, the TRT absolutely helps me retain more than anything. That's what it does. You know, as far as building, you know, I haven't really done a bulk cycle in a long time. You know, I sit pretty steadily between like 200, 210 pounds, depending on the time of year. And, you know, I've actually this last probably 9 months been on a real steady sort of journey to see what I could do in terms of body comp. The last DEXA scan I got, I was 203 pounds at about 11.5% body fat. So,
whoa. Yeah, dude, that's insane. That's wicked low. I was at the beginning of this year, I was just at 200 pounds.
Okay.
And I've cut myself down to 178 I was yesterday.
Okay.
And but I was like bulking for 2 years, dude. I was eating 3,500 to 4,000 calories a day, just trying to put on muscle so hard. And it's really hard for me.
Yep.
And that's with lifting 5 days a week.
Yep.
And consistent high calories, you know, and it's just layers of paint. You know, I've been lifting for 16 years and it's like a layer of paint every year, you know?
I mean, that's what it is, man. Like I've been lifting for probably about the same, about 16, 17 years. You know, and really until I was in my mid 30s, it was really, really difficult for me to put weight on and hold it, especially.
Yeah.
And as I've gotten, you know, later 30s and especially now in my 40s, it is easier for me to hold weight than it is, you know, than it ever used to be. And that's just, you know, a product of age. So.
Melanotan, that's interesting. I mean, I've heard about it. So that actually makes your skin darker.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, so I can. Number one, I mean, it's a number of things, but let's be real. We all look better tan, right? And I don't live in South Florida anymore. I can't, you know, just walk out in the backyard.
Dude, I'm a ghost, man.
I can't walk out in the backyard for, you know, 30 minutes and I'm not on the boat every day like I used to be. You know, being here in Utah, we get plenty of sun, but certainly in the winter, you know, it's very, very minimal. And with my travel schedule, you know, being gone as much as I am, it's tough for me to get sun. And there are some other effects of melanotan too. I mean, it does help with libido and stuff like that as well. So I mean, and it's a very, very mild dose that I take. You can overdo it really, really easily. Like I've seen some people that overdid it and like end up looking like they're black, like legitimately that dark.
Wow.
But yeah, that is something that I don't really cycle on and off of that because the dose is so minimal. But like I said, I've taken a lot of different peptides, man. I mean, tesamorelin, ipamorelin, you know, growth hormone stimulators. You know, I've messed with some of the GLPs. I ran a cycle of retatrutide last fall. You know, and that was, I'd come off of that probably three-ish weeks before I did that last body comp scan. And I'm getting ready to do another one in June just to kind of see where things have, you know, have leveled out at. But I'm always looking, you know, at that kind of stuff, biohacking as it were, seeing what kind of edge I can get. You know, the biggest thing for me at this point, obviously I got a 2-year-old, right? And I'm 42. So I've got to keep myself limber and mobile and agile. So I can still be chasing him around, you know, 10 years from now.
Well, not to mention you have like 20-foot snakes.
It does help with that as well. Yes, it does help with that as well.
Yeah, it's like me, I work outside, but like most people don't realize that because of how wet I am, but I've seen so much stuff cut out of my dad from working out in the Florida sun his whole life. And, you know, I work in utilities and field operations, and I just wear the, you know, UPF
Yep.
shirts down, I have a tan line on my wrist.
Mm-hmm.
You can see it.
Yep.
It's ridiculous from there to there because I wear gloves and
Yep.
then I have my shirt, so
Yep.
it's like, but yeah, I have to protect myself because my genetics, it's like some of the guys I work with are out in the sun all day, every day. It doesn't affect them.
Yep.
But my family is we're not built that way.
Well, and it's also different, like you said, when you're in it every single day, right? Like that just accumulated exposure will definitely have an effect. And again, the South Florida sun, I tell people all the time, it's a different sun. Like the intensity of it down there is different than other places in the country. So
yeah.